Hello, extra time.
They're important to the league not to get a hype because it damages your reputation. It makes people, when they read it, just laugh at you.
Simple look, they're playing in the League One and they're playing in the Europa League and they're credit in the game in this country. Maybe we should get Stephen Kenny then to manage the Irish team.
Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the Extratime Football Podcast. I'm your host Luke Jordan. Delighted to say Tom O'Connor's joining me. Tom, how are you?
Not so bad, Luke, not so bad. It's good to see proper, somewhat competitive action back. You know, I had the Malone Cup the week before, you've the President's Cup, which is just the Dublin version of the Malone Cup this week.
Looking forward to starting the season?
Oh, I think so. I think, look, at the period of hibernation, you know, the cobwebs are starting to slowly fall away. But like I said, the likes of the Malone Cup, the likes of the new Leinster Senior Cup, we have in our midst probably the ultimate Leinster Senior Cup guru in Dave Donal. It'd be interesting to get him on when the Leinster Senior Cup eventually, you know, when this season's competition winds down in 2027. Look, it's been a long off season. Much has been talked about the off season now, and I just can't wait to blow the cobwebs off, get out and watch some proper live competitive football. Because look, as people say, look, the league is your bread and butter, so no better time than the present to get started. So look, it's an interesting both First Division and Premier Division to come, hopefully. So an exciting title race in both divisions, hopefully. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think we can all agree, look, it was great to get to see live action again on Friday night. We'll come back in 2 seconds, but just to chat about what's coming up today, as we promised last week, of our Premier Division preview show, kind of our part 2 of our season opener for the 12th season now of the Extratime podcast. Is great. So we've chatted with the Premier Division clubs. We also managed to get First Division club that we missed out last week. It was a Kerry, so we have the Kerrymen podcast coming on later on as well. So we will chat Kerry football too. But first of all, President Cup. I was at the game report for extratime.com. If you're a Shamrock Rovers fan, I think you'd be delighted in terms of, and I know Stephen Bradley pre-game spoke about, it was an important match, but they did view it as a friendly. They were going to make changes. Yeah, they made changes, all right, but that was still a very strong 11 they put out. And then the 5 changes brought at half time. The talent coming on, obviously made huge difference in the second half. But as a whole, if I was a Shamrock Rovers fan, Tom, I think looking at that there, you'd be quite content with what we saw on Friday night.
Yeah, I think like you know, in the previews for the game as well, and much has been said, I suppose, in the off-season about the settled shape of the Shamrock Rovers side. I mean, a lot of the players who have come in have previously been with them, like the likes of Johnny Kenny's back on loan, Aaron McInniff, you know, back after his adventure in Australia, Marcus Poom coming back for his loan. Even, you know, Lee Stacey, if I'm right, was with Shamrock Rovers underage. I'm open to correction on that, but I think he was with Shamrock Rovers as well. So the only real new players are Dara Burns, and I say that as I realise I'm talking to a Pats fan, and Josh Honohan. I mean, look, Josh Honohan really showed promise at Cork City. They got relegated, obviously. How did he slotted in? Seemed to be played quite well at the President's Cup. Look, I'm only watching from a different viewpoint than you. He got his goal. Overall, were you impressed by his performance?
Oh, yeah. I think we'll go to the new players now, really, I suppose. Start with Honohan. He was excellent, slotted into that back three seamlessly. Started on the left, come in then to the right, played in the middle. Brilliant performance. Obviously, the goal, obviously, is probably the talking point for him. I think he had a bit of a celebration with a darts he was talking about after the game. But it was the James Madison, they might call him now. But no, he was excellent. Also, Dara Burns, I kind of wrote my piece after the game. He was maybe the pantomime villain. Every time he touched the ball, he was getting booed. But again, he's only finding his feet, kind of struggled a bit in England. Probably hasn't played a lot of football the last 12 months. Again, to give him 6 more weeks of consistent first team football, he'd be flying again. He showed a glimmer of his talent on the day. I think the standout player really, though, even though he is a Rovers player from last year, but I think Stephen Bradley won. We'll hear the audio in a sec. Was talking about on post match. I think Conan Noonan was exemplary, brilliant footballer. I'll be honest, didn't know much about him pre-match. Obviously, you had seen a bit of Darren Nugent last season when he was playing, but for Noonan himself, excellent. I think Stephen Bradley called him after the game the most 2-foot footballer he's ever seen. Really, like, you know, he was comparing to David Bentley, which again, former England international, is a high praise. He was excellent out. I mean, I didn't cop it till I actually watched the highlights back till Bradley said after the match he was taking corners with his left and right foot. And the only player I can actually think of, Tom, that I ever seen do that was in the Premier League was remember Santi Cazorla. He
thought
was
he
able
was
to
all
switch.
funny. I was watching that video earlier on this weekend. Yeah.
He could switch from his left to right corners, and it was seamless. Like, so look, I think that they were the two bright spots for me for the Shamrock Rovers. I think Conan was excellent centre back, looked a real fine there, and obviously Pico Lopez to come back into the team too, and Conan Noonan. I think they were the two real standouts for me.
And I think, look, like you mentioned there, you mentioned the likes of Conan Noonan, who, I mean, his absence due to illness and stuff like that has been well documented. So it's great to see him back to hopefully to full fitness, and whatever is shown there, it's obviously a great start to the season for him. And Darren Nugent went out, got game time with Drogheda United as well. So I mean, while Shamrock Rovers are, they're taking a few people, like we say, from outside clubs, the likes of Honohan, the likes of Burns, and bringing back those players who had shone for them before, even coming through the likes of Conan Noonan, the likes of Nugent. We saw, the likes of Farzai, the likes of Najrazi last season going out, even the likes of Kieran Cruz, who I know he's gone permanently Bray Wanderers, but Freddie Turley's gone on loan there. You've Carl Lennox gone on loan to Wexford. You have, Michael Leddy's come back out in the second loan, gone to Ballymena on loan. He was at Drogheda last season. So I mean, the Shamrock Rovers Academy, they're still bringing players through as well, as probably better than any other club. I think it's nearly fair enough to say, and bringing players through to I won't say fill the gaps, but as players are moving out, like even look, there's going to be a lot of talk this season. I mean, the spotlight is going to be on Leon Poles, and yet he's at the club about 5 years. He's been learning from Alan Manus. It's not as if they suddenly, people kind of looked and went, who'll they bring out? Who'll they bring in to replace? And there was talk maybe Ed McGinty, or there was talk maybe of other goalkeepers coming back. But Stephen Bradley has faith that Leon Poles knows the Shamrock Rovers system. So for the rest of our fans of clubs across the rest of the league, it's look, you mentioned maybe a glorified friendly, but at the same time, seeing the likes of these academy players coming through, it sent out a warning sign to other clubs in the league.
Oh yeah, look, we'll talk past maybe in a sec, but just in terms of Rovers, and just I suppose one thing that stood out for me in the game was that strength and depth. I mean, I was talking to a friend of mine after the game, who's a Shamrock Rovers fan, and he remarked to me, he said, this is probably the strongest Shamrock Rovers team he's seen. And like, that's, you look at the players that weren't available, you look at the players that come on, like Trevor Clarke come on, obviously scored a brace, obviously stands out, but Rory Gaffney come on, was excellent. I know he's 34, but still a quality footballer. Lee Grace come on his day, probably one of the best centre backs in the league. Gary O'Neill, probably on his day, the best holding midfield player in the league. If Dylan Watts to come in there, if Jack Byrne didn't play, Pico Lopez didn't play, who else didn't play? Richie Towell didn't play, Johnny Kenny. Like it's just an abundance of talent. Like it really is frightening for the league perspective. I think sometimes, I don't know, last week I thought in my head I was kind of gearing up to trying to hope there was a title race this year. But then you watch the game on Friday. Yeah, it's a friendly in essence. I understand that there's a tinge of competitiveness off it, but just on the 90 itself, if Pats do want to get into that upper echelons of league titles or being even in the picture, like I said, there's maybe still a bit of a gap there to close in. Maybe Derry, on hindsight's a great thing. Maybe Derry are still maybe the ones that are the closest to getting to them. Obviously, the signs of Hooben and so on. And we'll hear from Simon Collins later on his preview of Derry. Well, look, what we'll do is we're going to have a listen first to Stephen Bradley, and he was chatting to the press after the match, and he was speaking here about Conan Noonan, who was excellent today.
Conan's one I've been talking about for quite some time now. Unfortunately, some issues have held him back, but from the back end of last season to now, he's been good in terms of training all the time, and naturally, probably the most naturally gifted player both foot that you'd say, I don't know what he noticed. He took the corners with his right and his left foot, which is that's him, the assist, one with his left foot, one with his right. That's he's right to play. But the back end of last season, I know he played late on last season, but since the end of last summer he's been training fully, no issues at all. and yeah, he's ready to go now. Like, and again, I've been talking about it for quite some time, but it's so pleasing when you say to a young player playing in that stage, and he just looks so comfortable, just looks like one of us, which is really, really nice to see. So he's ready to go, which is great.
The next voice you're going to net here is Trevor Clarke, and I actually asked him, just in terms of, was he surprised by maybe Pats in the game, and that's followed up by kind of that. But himself, McInnes, and other players now have left and all come back to the club. Let's have a listen to Clarke.
Were you surprised by Pats to see him sitting so deep, or that kind of expected?
Not really, no. I don't know. I don't really focus on the opposition. I think we go into games, and no matter who we come up against, whether it's Pats or Bows or anybody, whoever it is, I think our main thing is just focus on ourselves, keep doing what we do. I mean, we win the game because the chances will come.
Seems to be a trend as well. Yourself, Aaron McInnes now coming back, like the door's an open door policy for players to go and come back to this club.
That's what it seems like. Yeah, it seems everybody that was at the club and obviously has gone away has come back. Me, Aaron McInnes, even Jack Bourne when he was away. But why wouldn't you want to come back here? You see what they've done over the past 4 years. Even when I moved away at the start, I think the first year I moved away in the summer, and they went on to win the FAI Cup, and I was kind of kicking myself that they won it because I wasn't there. But it just goes to show from the year I left them what they've done as a club and how they are now.
On Pats, then I think it's hard to judge. Like, you know, it's a friendly. You don't want to overanalyze the game, but I think there was elements that you can look to. We might touch on the goalkeeper in a sec. I think the criticism maybe is a bit harsh over the last couple of days.
Yeah, and look, I suppose more players to bring in, like you said, it's hard to judge. You have a lot more players who came in, especially, you know, players who might be expecting to play regularly throughout the season. The likes of the two Cavanighs, the likes of Ruairi, Keating, Aaron Bulger, Conor Keeley. I mean, there are 5 players. Then on top of that, you know, your new keeper, Marcelo Pedaluga, who is very highly rated at Liverpool. There's 5 or 6 players who would be looking to make a mark on the Pats first team this year. With Rovers, will you see that amount of transition? Probably not. I look back at the season where Dundalk were most effective. They brought in 2 signings in the off season. They brought in Robbie Benson and Patrick McElhenney, and they ended up, you know, going and qualifying for the Europa League group stages because that foundation was there. That foundation doesn't seem to be there. You know, it seems to be there at Rovers. It doesn't seem to be there with any other club really in the league. Maybe Derry, to a certain extent, brought in, like say, Patrick Hooven and Dan Kelly from Dundalk. Beyond that, there wasn't a huge amount of transfer movement at the Ryan McBride Brandywell. So go back to Pats for a second. I just want to make a point in relation to where I'd said about the Shamrock Rovers Academy being one of the strongest. I'm looking at the outgoings for Pats over the off season, and I mean an awful lot of academy products have gone. So I mean it must also credit to Ger O'Brien and the guys behind the scenes at Pats Academy. There's been a serious a serious talent and produced by the club, and some have gone into the first team and, you know, maybe shot straight through it. The likes of Adam Murphy didn't spend too long, gone. Sam Curtis obviously was incredible last season, gone. You know, even Tommy Lonergan, you know, I know he came from UCD, but he was a young, you know, he's still a teenager when he was playing. So, you know, I think it's worth paying tribute to the amount of work been done by the Pats Academy as well. But look, like you say, they're probably just not at the same level. They're not as settled a squad as Derry, and then obviously a step above that Rover. So I mean, look, you saw a lot of new signings on the field on you know, the weekend at the President's Cup. What did you make of you know, was there anybody maybe caught your eye, or anybody maybe will take a wee while to settle in?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Look, the 5 of the new signings started. We'll go through all of them actually. Well, look, Pedaluga and goal, you mentioned there. Look, 2 goals, bit suspect for them. Football fans, always football fans, they'll jump to conclusions straight away. You know, anyone writing them off is ridiculous. You know, the kids played 1 game. Let's give them 10, 15 matches. I actually, John Daly in his post match was spot on. Really, he spoke about how Joey Anang in the President's Cup 2 years ago made a clanger for one of the goals, and he ended up being a brilliant player until he obviously left midway through the season to go back to England. He was very good for Pats in that kind of short period he was there. So look, I think Pedaluga deserves more time, so I'll hold judgment on him. Brandon Cavaney mentioned, showed flashes. I think he'll come good. I kind of bigged him up my preview for Pats to start the year. He was the player I kind of looked to maybe might provide that extra spark to the team. I think he'll come good. Very Keane had a tough day. Pats went very direct, lumping balls. It sat very deep. Was a bit disappointed actually in the shape, to be honest. Thought maybe should have had a goal, Pats or Rover. Sorry, bit disappointed over that. The fact they just kind of reverted to kind of Route 1 style football. To Keating, I think, yeah, he's a physical guy. He can definitely do something in terms of a long ball pull up to him. But I think maybe more support around him was get the better of him. Felt Aaron Bolger struggled, but he's not playing his natural position. He's filling in right back, and I think right back could be a issue this season. Pats, I thought they might have added the right back in. They haven't. They've gone Ryan McLaughlin and Soyberg, and gone by their injury records. I think that's a risk, not having. I don't know if Soyberg, a player, is going to play 30 games this season. Ryan McLaughlin has always struggled with injuries in his career. He actually retired and come out of retirement now, so could be a potential issue there. And if Bolger is the third choice, could be a problem. Connor Keating struggled. Looked a bit slow on the turn, but again, first game, new club. I think you have to hold judgment. He was very good last year with Drogheda. So look, out of the players that started, Brandon Callan probably settled the best. He showed flashes. The one player actually I thought was brilliant on the day when he got the ball, I think Keane Levy's going to have a great season. Shelton didn't want him to go. They were disappointed he left. Went back to Pats. He's a real talent. I think he's someone Pats could really build a midfield around. I think you don't see in the modern game players now who get the ball and drive with 20, 30 yards. The game's more conditioned to pass and move, which is fine. And that's what makes the game probably as quick and brilliant today. But there is something about, though, a jinky player that can take the ball and drive the ball 20 yards. There's something in the game still. I think it's slowly dying maybe with modern coaching, but I think he again showed flashes. Big worry, actually, the Forrester did go off an injury. It looked like it was his knee. You're hoping it's nothing serious, but Tom, if he's in any way out for a long period of time, especially with a knee injury, that's going to be a huge blow.
Yeah, and look, 13 goals last season, and probably, I won't say he masked over the fact, but he's your top goal scorer from midfield. Obviously, John Daly looked around and said, right, listen, we need to get more goals from up top. But like you mentioned there with Keating, unless the support is there for him, and for me, look, I don't think I'm on my own in this. I think Chris Forrester is one of the best midfielders in the league for since he's come back. And obviously before he went to, he's a super player. So if there are if there are going to be periods where Pats are not going to be with him, like you say, with true injury, it is going to leave a big hole in it. Like I have to echo your enthusiasm for Keane Levy. I watched him last season a couple of times. I thought he's fabulous, and it's that off the cuff stuff. It's that stuff. And Brandon Kavanagh, funny, is the same. He's I love that term you used there, jinky. It's just you can't read him. It's football now is, like you say, it's a lot of systems and programs and how you play this, and sometimes it's very hard to defend against because back in our day would have been known as the street footballer, like. So and I am looking forward to seeing Keane Levy and Brandon Kavanagh for Pats. They do give it that little bit difference, but look, it remains to be seen how long Chris Forster's out for, whether he will be hopefully back this weekend or back fairly soon, because if the Pats do harbour ambitions of having a decent title push, which obviously there's a few nuts and bolts to be tightened following last weekend's game, but he's obviously going to be a crucial cog in the Pats midfield, and obviously forming part of their attack as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, hopefully, touch wood, that he'll be okay. And I think, look, most football fans they want to see the best. Like I mentioned last week, Aaron McEneff come back to the league. You want the best players playing the league. You don't want, regardless of whatever club colour you're wearing, you don't want the best players being injured. So, by obviously my own personal perspective, I want them playing Friday night. I'm not gonna lie, but I think we all agree you want the best players playing, so I hope the injuries not too serious. We're going to listen now to the voice of John Daly. Also spoke to the media post-match of Friday night, and afterwards then we're going to hear from Ruairi Keane, who spoke to our reporter Andrew Dempsey.
Room there, everybody's disappointed. It was one of those, I don't think from the first minute, I don't think we turned up, which was disappointing with such a good crowd through, and I think collectively everybody didn't turn up, which was extremely disappointing. Such a decent game to finish a pre-season off on. It's one way you're hoping to come in and I'm standing here saying we played really well, but we didn't. We'll obviously go back and have a look at it and try and put our finger on it. But I think when players that are good players are passing the ball behind people and nearly out of play at times, then it's they're not at it, and it's obviously disappointing.
Grand, yeah. So Ruairi, I suppose, start with today. Look, you must be happy enough. I think you got a couple of goals, more than likely through to the next round of the competition. You must be pleased enough.
Yeah, delighted. It's always nice to score goals, especially in a new team, new players. That's my job. I'm here to score goals, and please God that can continue.
Yeah, and I was just chatting to Jamie there. Like you probably think you found your scoring boots in pre-season too. I think it's 4 goals already.
Yeah, no, look, it's been pre-season's been really tough, but it's been really enjoyable. It's what I've needed, just to refocus again and get going. And I've been delighted to be able to chip in and help the team any way I can, and hopefully can continue this season.
And your first couple of weeks as a Saint, how's it been?
It's been great, really enjoyable. Yeah, really enjoying it. It's a great group of people. Players and staff and people behind the scenes, so it's a great football club, and I'm looking forward to the season ahead.
Yeah, has it maybe, is it everything you expected so far? Maybe a few things you've kind of noticed that?
Yeah, no, I always knew it's the size of the football club, but I didn't realise kind of how big it is until you get in somewhere. So no, it's been great, and all I want to do is repay that faith they've shown in me and score goals, and please God we can be successful at the end of the season.
Yeah, because I know at the end of last season you probably saw the buzz around. I'm sure you probably would have played against Past towards the end of last season. You saw the buzz that was around the club, so did that probably encourage you to sign at that point?
Yeah, no, they beat us in the semi-final of the cup, and things like that, days like that when you were so close, and you get pipped at the final hurdle. A cup final day out is what everybody wants, and I didn't want that to be a flash in the pan at the time, and I thought I'd love to do that every year. And then obviously when I heard of the interest, and that was my first thought, to play in Europe and try and qualify for group stages and challenge for leagues and cups, and that's exactly what I want to do at this stage of my career.
Yeah, I know it's probably a good bit down the road, but I don't think you've played in Europe before, have you?
Once, when I was 20, Sligo Rovers.
Right.
Played Europa League qualifiers when I came through the academy, so
yeah.
had a little spell. Played 2 games. One was in Norway, so I know what it's all about, and I know what has to be done. So I'm really looking forward to that.
I suppose those experiences when you're that young, they probably live with you for
absolutely,
so long.
Yeah. Well, you get a taste of it, and then you just want more. So that's 10 years ago now, nearly. So I'm looking forward to getting back there, and hopefully we can be successful and go a long way.
Yeah, and look, I suppose the start of the season as well, I think it's a trip to one of your former clubs in the opening night.
Yeah, no, going back, when I came back from England during COVID, I stayed close to home, and I played a season there, and enjoyed my football, and kind of found my love for football again. So yeah, no, it'd be good to go back, and it's great. They've had a great season last year, great manager, and they've got some good players. So we'll be working hard after next week, and hopefully we can get off to a good start.
And that's probably unfair of me to ask, but have you set any targets for yourself this season, or is it more like kind of as a team? Or
yeah, no targets. Obviously, it's only positive to have targets and want to achieve personal goals, but my only goal is to take every opportunity you get in life, because you only get one chance. So that's what I'm going to continue to do.
Right, look.
Coming up next, we're going to start now our previews for the Premier Division. Obviously, myself, Mark Dara, done Shamrock Rovers and Pats last week in the build up to the President's Cup. So if you want to listen, tune into last week's episode if you missed it. We spoke about obviously the 2 teams and the year ahead. First up, though, we're going to listen to Stephen Doyle, who spoke about Bohemians and their prospects for the season ahead. Now we're going to turn our attention to Bohemians, and delighted to say Stephen Doyle is joining us. Stephen, how are you?
I'm very good, Luke. Thank you. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I suppose we'll get started with maybe before we get into the team and the players and the season ahead. The new jersey came out today, the away kit as we record on Monday. Any thoughts on it?
Well, my first thought is, why wasn't Rob Cornwall modelling it? I'm looking at a picture over here. We've got Keith Buckley, the skipper. Well, I suppose rightly so, modelling the shirt. But we bring back Rob Cornwall all the way from the States, the most handsome man in the League of Ireland. He's not modelling the new shirt. So questions have to be asked of the club there already. Listen, yeah. I joke. I think it's a lovely shirt, and I know supporters of other clubs will have a good old laugh at those, and they'll stick any old band or whatever on the jersey. Look, there's a bit of history there. My dad, actually, funny enough, was a roadie at that gig in 1977. He worked for Harry Crosby. He brought all the stage equipment up there on the day. It was the day the Dubs beat Armagh, the semi-final at the All-Ireland as well that year, 1977. So look, there is a bit of history there to it with the club. And again, as ever, there's going to be a lot of money hopefully made to go to a very good charity that will help children, underprivileged kids, get into the music and that kind of thing. So that's always a good way to look at it.
Yeah, I think it's 10% of all the sales go to the charity, which is excellent. What do you think then? Bob Marley jersey or the Tin Lizzy jersey? Which one would you pick?
Listen, I'm a reggae man, Luke. Always go for Bob Marley. And I was
Okay.
upset. I was in Bob Marley's house, would you believe, a few years back. Went down to Jamaica, do a bit of travelling, and went down to see his house and all that. So yeah, it'll be always Bob for me. Although I still love Philo as well, a legend.
Let's look ahead then to the season. I suppose I suppose if social media is not always the greatest barometer to go by, but it kind of seems from the outside that there has been worries maybe coming into this year. Might even touch on the hangover possibly last year, starting so well, and then obviously disappointed to miss out in Europe, the cup final. Like, where do you see Bowes the most, Stephen, going into the kick-off this weekend?
Well, I think last season, I think about going into last season. Well, look, I suppose the same with every League of Ireland fan going into a new season. You've got hope, you're feeling optimistic about what's ahead. I think with the players that Bohemians signed last year, everybody was feeling pretty hopeful, especially with the return of Danny Grant, of course, a hero at Daly Park. And I think obviously that optimism then shot through the roof with the way Bow started, and they were top of the league for the first, whatever it was, 8 to 10 weeks of the season. But they didn't maintain it. And that was the big problem for Bows last year, was consistency. I think there was a number of factors involved there. I think there was issues with defensive midfield. I think there was issues at centre back. And to be fair, and I just want to give a big shout out to James Talbot as well. Look, James obviously has had his issues that the club have been public about. I have full respect and admiration for James Talbot for taking time out of the game, because I think I've done it myself. I've stepped away from my own job due to issues with depression and anxiety and that kind of stuff. So I know what it's like. I've been in James's shoes. And I'd say to anybody out there, if you're going through any stuff like that, listen, look after your head first, look after your mind, look after your own body, because that's the most important thing in the world. And I really hope James Talbot gets himself back together, because, look, he obviously was suffering last season. Everybody could see it. I think it's great that he's gone public on it, and I just wish him all the best. And hopefully we will see him back. If he decides not to come back to football, that's brilliant as well, because, you know, he has to look after himself. He's the number one in his own life, and that's the most important thing. But then, look, moving on from that, look, Bows have had their issues there. I said Keith Buckley was played quite a lot at right back last season. That was a big problem. You always play your best players in their best positions. I think Kukulovic was unlucky not to get more game time at right back, and that's why Keith Buckley then was being put in there. Wasn't good for the confidence of the young Polish lad. And I think he's a good player. He's a good player in there. So I think that was an issue. I think playing Jordan Flowers at sometimes at left back as well rather than central midfield, that was a big problem. As the season wore on, then Johnny Afolabi started to show brilliant form. It was great for him. He was banging goals, but it just didn't coincide with good results. I think the big issue last season, Luke, was the Dublin derbies. And forget about Rovers, because look, Rovers are way ahead of everybody else. It was the derby matches against Shells and against Pats, and even one against UCD, would you believe? We finished 2 points behind Shells. And when you look at the games against Shelbourne last season, Bohemians failed to beat Shells in 4 matches. They drew 3 times and lost 1 match. Like, that's not acceptable for a squad as good as Bohemians compared to the squad that Damien Duff was working with last season. Damien Duff didn't have a recognised striker for most of the season last season. Sean Boyd had his injury problems. And then the Pats games, they lost 2 home matches against Pats. Again, unacceptable for a club like Bohemians who are going to try and qualify for Europe. I thought the 3-2 was an absolutely bananas game at the start of last season. And again, then the 2-0 defeat towards the end of last season, like, they were unacceptable results for Bohemians. And the 2-0 in October came back to back with the defeat to Dundalk. And they were 2 crucial defeats when Bohemians were still in with a shout of qualifying for Europe. And to lose those games wasn't good enough. And I think that does fall on the manager and his coaching staff. And they were the big results. Like, Bohs finished 2 points behind Shells, 4 points behind Pats. They were the key results. The other one as well, Luke, was the 1-1 against UCD in April. Like, that was just, you can't, like, UCD.
Yeah,
I don't want to be insulting to them as a club, but like, they're a poor squad last season, and Bow should not be drawn 1-1. with a side like UCD. I was at that match myself last season, and Bows were just really poor. They just couldn't unlock a deep defending UCD side, and it just wasn't good enough. They did finish on 58 points last season, believe it or not, in sixth position, which was better than the previous season. They finished sixth on 46 points. It was 52 points the previous season. They finished fifth and got into the cup final. And it was just a really, it was a disappointing end to last season. I said those back-to-back defeats to Pats and Dundalk, which really were crucial, and Bows not qualifying for Europe, and then of course the cup final. Again, you know, regards to putting players in positions where they shouldn't be, like Jordan Flores starting at left back, going up against Jake Mulroney for Pats, who played a big part in one of the goals. Again, just another bad managerial decision, and it should have been Paddy Kirk, a Bows man through and through. I really thought should have started that game against St. Pat with Flores in central midfield. And Bows going to lose the cup final. So it was just it was almost like they started off brilliantly into the season, and just as the season wore on, it got more and more disappointing. The supporters, you know, I think the manager lost his supporters midway through the season last season, and he just couldn't get them back. And I think Declan Devine goes into this season under real pressure to start winning games, because if it doesn't go well at the start of the season, he could come under huge pressure from the supporters.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the 3-2 game, because I covered that match, and at that time, for Pat's perspective, Clancy was under serious pressure. They went 1-0 up in that game, and then suddenly collapsed then 20 minutes into the game, or 30 minutes into the game, and 3-1, and went down to 10 men as well. Again, like that, their performance, like you mentioned, the UCD game, like that's 5 points there they dropped, where that takes them into Europe. So again, like, you know, I think you mentioned the manager. I think if those kind of a form to replicate again this year, he could come under some serious pressure.
Yeah, absolutely, he will. And like I was just looking back at that 3-2 game, like it was a mad game. Like what do you say? Like there was a real kind of, in a lot of matches last season, there was just seemed to be a real soft centre to Bows. Like they're you know, the defending of set pieces, defending at crosses, and you got two good centre halves in there, the two big Polish lads, and it was just the same mistakes just seem to be happening again and again and again, and that's just down to, you know, poor coaching from the management. And yeah, I think Bows supporters are going to be, look, they're not happy. That's it. It's simple as that, you know. And I know that from talking to people myself. The squad going into this season, well, you know, they're obviously they signed the three Estonian lads. Look, I look at the negatives of the squad starting out, Luke. Like, you've got the makeup of the squad is just, it doesn't look great. You've got two recognised centre backs there in Rob Cornwall and Keane Byrne. I think Rob Cornwall is going to be an astute signing. He's gone off to America for 2 seasons. He's 29 years of age. He's peak years for a centre back. I was at the Pats game a couple of weeks ago, the pre-season warm-up out in Abbottstown, and Cornwall, I couldn't believe physically how he looked, because he's lost a lot of weight. When I say lost a lot of weight, because you know yourself, you would have seen Rob a few seasons back, he was always very bulky with muscle.
Big guy.
A lad who always kept in really good shape, but it was all muscle, and he seems to have trimmed down. I just wonder if that's the S&C that he's had over in the States, where he's taken off a lot of that muscle weight off himself. He looks really lean, he looks very mobile, and I think he could be a huge player for Bows this season. He's playing alongside Keane Byrne. Now, Keane Byrne's only 21. He's come through the academy. He had 4 league appearances last season, just 3 starts. He also started the cup final, deservedly so, because he played brilliant in the semi-final. I think Keane Byrne could be a really big player for Bows this season. He's a very calm, very assured centre back. He's got an old head on young shoulders, so I wouldn't have any concerns about him. But it's just there's no backup. There's no backup there. Who else is going to play at centre back if there's injuries to those 2 players? So I think there's big pressure on Pat Fennan and on Declan Devine to get a centre back or 2 into the squad before the season starts, and that's not ideal in the week leading up to the first match. Goalkeeper wise, with James stepping away, Luke Dennison then is the man. I think Luke Dennison is a decent keeper. Obviously played for Longford Town before coming to Bows. I saw him in the pre-season match against Pat. Wasn't great for the goal that Pat scored in that game. Is he a first choice Premier Division keeper? There's question marks over him, it has to be said. They bring in this guy, Kasper Charatska, Polish goalkeeper. He's been playing second tier in Cyprus. He's 24 years of age, quite inexperienced still. I was looking at his stats. He kept 8 clean sheets in 18 matches last season for Lissy. So look, again, question marks over him. Devine, the goalkeeper himself, he went out to see Casper out in Cyprus. He seems happy enough with him. So that's a Devine signing. It'll be interesting to see how he gets on. Both supporters, I'm sure, will be hoping he hits the ground running. So there is issues at the back there with regards to centre halves. They've signed one of the 3 Estonian players coming in from Florida, Talon Michael Lander, right back. He looks like he's going to be the starting right back with Kukulovic as his backup. Lalander's got 16 Estonia caps. He's played over 250 matches, top flight in Estonia. He's played in the Champions League. He can get goals. He scored 3 goals last season. That's good to see. He's only 26 years of age, so I'll be quite hopeful he's going to be a really good signing for Bohs. So they look okay there at right back. They've got options. At left back, obviously, you've got Paddy Kirk there as well. No real backup as a left back. It looks like it's going to be Jordan Flores again. Then you're looking through midfield. There's a lot of midfielders there, Luke. I don't know if there's too many midfielders. Now, the issue, I suppose, at central midfield is that Keith Buckley, is he going to play this season? I know he had another operation there a couple of weeks ago. Hopefully he's going to be back at some stage this season because he's crucial for Bohs. But I don't know how many games he's going to play or how soon we'll see him back. I know the change of McManus has a bit of a knock. We might see him for the first 3 or 4 weeks this season. So that's another big blow. There's going to be huge reliance there on Adam McDonald and Jordan Flores for the start of the season. Adam McDonald, I think, is one of the most underrated midfielders in the League of Ireland. Brilliant player for turning over possession and getting attacks going from central midfield. So hopefully he does well. He's 26 now, coming into his peak years. Flores, we know what he can do. He's just not a breaker-upper, though, like Keith Buckley. And that's the big issue for me for Bohemians going into this new season. There's no really top-quality defensive midfielder. You look, Luke, throughout the top sides, like Derry City have Diallo. Rovers, you've got Gary O'Neill and Palm as well. You've got Coyle at Shells. You guys at Pats have Lennon. And then you've got Deegan at Drogheda. You need a good defensive midfielder in there that's going to break up the play and going to take the ball off the opposition. And I can't see that in the Bohemians midfield. There's a lot of good wingers there. You've got on the left-hand side, you've got Danny Grant can play on the left-hand side. He can play on the right-hand side. You've got Dylan Connolly as well. They brought in Dale Rooney, of course, from Drogheda United. He can play on the left, or will mainly play on the left. I think he's going to be a really good signing for Bohs. Got 5 goals, 10 assists last season in 33 matches. Another good thing about him as well, he doesn't get booked very often, just 4 yellow cards last season. So you want players not to be avoiding any suspensions throughout the season. It's good to see from him. I'll be interested to see how he gets on. He's only 25. Ballymun man, he's a north sider as well. Very important as well to have a few dubs in the squad for Bohemians. Declan McDade as well, another left-sided midfielder there. So I think Bohemians are really well stocked in midfield, and then Mark Miller coming in, attacking midfielder, one of the Estonian lads as well. He's 26. He's got 31 caps, over 250 top flight appearances in Estonia. He can score goals, he can get assists as well, and most importantly for Bohemians fans, he scored 2 goals to help Shamrock Rovers get knocked out of the Conference League a couple of years ago. So going to be really interesting to see how he gets on as well. Again, another player in his mid-20s, so they're bringing up the average age of the Bohs squad, which I think is crucial as well. And then up front, well, look, the big problem for Bohs is losing Johnny Afalabi. Great to see him scoring over in Belgium in his first 3 or 4 appearances over there. I hope he goes on to bigger and greater things, because he's a brilliant lad, Johnny Afalabi, and he deserves to have a really successful career. So you've got James Akintunde, of course, there. Hopefully he stays injury-free. He's a really, really good player. And you've got the new lad coming in from Estonia, Sten Reincourt, 40 goals, 29 assists in 163 games. You wouldn't exactly say he's prolific, but he's a good player as a centre forward who can contribute not just goals but assists as well, which is really important. So again, you've got question marks over a lot of players and question marks over a few positions. The makeup of the squad. There's probably still a bit of work there to do for Pat Fennan, the director of football, and for Declan to get a couple of names in or a couple of bodies in the door before the season starts. I heard a whisper of perhaps a striker coming in from Poland. I don't know if that's 100%, but we shall see over the next couple of days.
Yeah, I think you touched on a couple of things there in terms of the defending aspect you mentioned, there were two centre backs going into the start of the season is really not ideal. You would imagine that they're going to go into the market and get another centre back, at least one more in to cover that position. Just when I look at the balance of the squad and I have it in front of me here, it screams to me where maybe last season they were very reliant on Afolabi for the goals. This year it could be a case of maybe spreading the goals around the team. Would that be fair to say? If you look at Dylan Connolly, Dale Rooney, Danny Grant as well can chip in with goals, and then like I said, obviously you'd hope the new striker for Bowes will start the season well, but like, it does kind of look to me that they're going to be relying on maybe those wide areas in midfield to chip in with goals this season.
Yeah, absolutely. We saw Dylan Connolly, his goal scoring improved towards the end of the season last season. So you'd hope 28 years of age, again, a player heading into his peak years, that he can pick that form up as well from the start of the season. I think he's one of those players as well that once he's in form, the fans really get behind him, and I think he could have a great season. So you would expect goals from him. Hopefully the new player as well, Martin Miller, will score a few from midfield. I think Danny Grant will be key as well. The season before he left, he got 7 goals and 17 appearances. He was absolutely brilliant, electric in 2020 before he left for Huddersfield. I thought the problem last season was, look, he came midway through the English season, coming back to Bohemians, and you'll always hear, Luke, you know yourself, I'm sure, players who come back from the UK and they come back for the start of a League of Ireland season, they're kind of halfway through an English season. It is so hard for a player to get form when they have missed pre-season with the League of Ireland club and they've a half a season behind them with the English club, or perhaps maybe they haven't played for them. So that is so hard for him. And I wasn't expecting anything from Danny Grant last season. He got 2 goals. I think this is the season for him. He's had a full pre-season now with Bowes. Hopefully he'll hit the ground running and he'll be able to kind of replicate some of that form from 2020. I've no doubt he will.
Who's the key player there, Bowes, this year, you think?
I'd like to say maybe one of these. I think this guy Martin Miller, I'm really interested to see how he gets on. I've forgotten about James Clarke as well, of course. He had a brilliant season last year as well. I think he's going to be really key for Bowes midfield. You forget he's only 23, a player who's going to get better and better. So I think he could be huge. But I think I'm looking at Keane Byrne. Strangely enough, as I said, he's so inexperienced with regards to top flight games here in the League of Ireland. But he just really impressed me. Anytime he went out on the pitch, like, he's a very tall player. He's not maybe as physically well built. That will come in time. As he does more S&C as his career develops. But it's just his reading of the game, I find, is magnificent for a player of his age. And as you know, Luke, that's really important for a central defender. It's not about your physicality, it's not about your tackling, it's about reading the game, because the best centre halves will know where the ball is going or where the danger man in the attack of the opposition is going, and they'll get there before them to stop what they're about to do. And I think Keane Byrne has that, and I think he could be a really key player for Bowes this season. He's the man I'm going to be watching. And look, I was a centre half myself back in the day. I'm a big lover of Italian football, Catenaccio, and centre the art of tackling and centre half defending. So yeah, look, I'm a big fan of Keane Byrne, and I really hope the season goes well for him.
Yeah, it was the one I look out for when I do see the Bowes play. Is probably James McManus. I just think he's such a young player, 18. He's such a talent. I think Coventry as well are interested in a few clubs abroad. So again, probably for me, he'd be the kind of one from the outside point of view.
Hey, Luke. No, don't be trying to move our players off now. I'll appreciate it.
Fair enough. We'll leave it there. What do you think then? If that was the current squad, no more signings, do you think that squad's too light to maybe qualify for Europe, push for Europe? Because I imagine the fans, and I would say that's their minimum expectation, is to get 4th place.
It is, yeah. You're kind of looking through the league and the other squads, and who has a better squad than Bowes. Rovers, of course, I think St. Pat's do. Shells have been a funny one. Looking through their squad, a lot of the players they've signed are League of Ireland players. I can see what Damien Duff is trying to do. I just wonder, has he signed players that are good enough to do what Shells want them to do? I'm not so sure about the makeup of their squad now. He could totally prove me wrong, and I'll look like an idiot at the end of the season. But I think there's big question marks over them. Dundalk, I don't think anybody knows what's going on at Dundalk at the moment.
I don't think Dundalk knows what's going on at Dundalk.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, and look, we all know Stephen O'Donnell is a brilliant coach. He's a brilliant manager. But there's a lot of stuff going on in the background there that maybe he's not so much in control of. So do they have a better squad? Question marks over than Bohemians. You would question that as well. Then you've got the likes of Drogheda. Well, they're kind of trying to get back into full-time football again. That might be, we'll see the best of Drogheda over the next couple of years. So to make the long story short, I do think Bohemians have a good enough squad to compete for top four. That all depends on the cup as well. But will they get there? I'm just not so sure. I still think there's question marks over Declan Devine's management. Again, as I said, look, I think he's a brilliant guy. He's putting his heart and soul into this squad and into this season. But I would just be concerned over what happens in game and tactically whether Bows can outsmart some of their opponents, as we see they didn't do last season. So, yeah, look, it's a big game. Friday night, they start off against Sligo Rovers at home, and they have to win that. I really think they have to win that because Sligo Rovers are a team that Bohemians should be beating, and certainly they should be beating them at home. And if it starts off with a draw or defeat, I think supporters are going to be very unhappy.
Yeah, and that's my final question to you then is Friday night looking ahead, how do you see the game going? Do you think Bows can start the season right?
Yeah, look, John Russell, I think he's under huge pressure as well as Sligo Rovers. He's one of the other managers like Declan Devine, who supporters are perhaps slightly unhappy with. He signed some good players though, John Russell. I think he's a very good coach. He puts a huge amount of work into what he does. He spends an awful lot of time analysing his own team, analysing other players that he wants to bring into the club. So I think he signed some good players there at Sligo Rovers. I think it's one of those games where I think it's a massive banana skin for Bohemians, and I think there is a potential for them to drop points here. I said it's just with so many new players coming in that Bows are relying on the three Estonian lads, Daly Rooney as well. Can they knit that all together for this game on Friday night? I couldn't say that 100%, but I think if you're kind of force me down to make a prediction, I think Bows will win it by maybe one goal.
Are you going for 1-0 then?
2-1.
Stephen, thanks very much, and we'll chat again soon.
Thanks, Luke.
Get in touch. You can email us at extratimelive@gmail.com or tag us on Instagram using the hashtag League of Ireland or tweet us at Extratime News.
Let's do it.
Now we turn our attention to Derry City. I'm glad to say Simon Collins with Derry Journals with us. Simon, how are you?
Not too bad, Luke. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no problem at all. I suppose just before we maybe get talking about the on the field matters, just as we record on Tuesday, bit of a maybe annoyance across the 900 Premier Division clubs the last day or so over tickets and away allocations. Report only 75 tickets for away fans this year in the Brandywell. Do you mind just clarifying why that's the situation and what's happening at the moment?
Yeah, obviously it's not ideal, and I've noticed obviously a lot of disgruntled Drogheda fans, who it's the first game of the season. They want to come up in force. They want to come up a lot of promise amongst Drogheda fans and what's happening down there. They moved to full-time football, and they normally travel well too up to Derry, but it's basically out of the club's hands. They've got almost 3,000 season ticket holders, so they're doing renovations at the north stand. So the South End Park stand is going to be, there's two tiers now that are going to be two sections of that are going to be demolished in preparation for the new north terrace that's going to be built. Work's underway now at the minute, and it has been delayed. So they were hoping to get it started by the time the European matches come into play. Hoping that was going to be erected at that stage, but doesn't look it's going to drag on a wee bit further. But that's basically the reason why there's so little space available for the away fans. They can't really take the season ticket holders their tickets off them. They've paid in advance, and they've so basically that's what it is. Look, there's just no room in the South End Park stand or anywhere else in the stadium where they can safely accommodate away fans, and that seems to be the allocation for now. Whether that changes as the season goes on and the works become near completion, I'm not sure, but it's not good. It's not ideal, but that's the reason.
Yeah, and there was no chance or no prospect of, say, a temporary stand or something being put in.
Not as far as I'm aware. I haven't been speaking to the club specifically about the issue, but that is basically what it is. There's such a demand now for tickets at the Brandywell. There's so many Derry City fans that can't get their hands on a season ticket. There's only a certain allocation for those. Um, there's not even going to be so many tickets on general sale then for matches as well too, which was the big hope for fans here. A lot of fans that I would know, the only time they get to see their team play is at away games. Which is that's the demand now for tickets and around Brandywell. With Derry going so well, and it doesn't look good in the club, but hopefully people realize that they really are. There's good people behind the scenes working hard, and they're getting it all from all angles, from Derry City fans and everyone else. So they are doing their best, and I think Drogheda were told that if there is any change and there is any more freed up, that they'll be told, and then the same is going to go with the rest of the teams that are going to be visiting.
Let's have a look then to the on the field stuff we're all more interested in. Is Ruairi Higgins under a bit of pressure this season? I suppose last year it started like a house on fire. I think it's pretty fair to say that they dipped a bit towards the end. Obviously, the cup disappointing too. Going at the Pats in penalties, especially when they're at the Brandywell. So is there a bit more pressure on Higgins this year for maybe success, possibly in the league?
There is. He'll admit that himself, but he welcomes that pressure because it means he's going well, and he's fighting at the right end. And look, he's been heavily backed. We all know that. Philip O'Doherty has backed him. He's given him basically everything that he wants. His marquee signing was Pat Hooman, and he went all out to get him. So definitely there's pressure. Now, at the same time, Ruairi Higgins is like, he seems like he's been there for a lifetime because he was a player for so long, and he's been involved with the club. He's been involved with Dundalk, who won league titles, and but he's very wet behind the ears in terms of management as well. We have to remember that this is only his starting his third full season in management. He had a lot of things going wrong on and off the pitch last year. Obviously, the loss of his brother, who died tragically and suddenly the start of last season. So he had to deal with all that, and he had lost Alan Reynolds too, who left as assistant manager. Got Paddy McLaughlin to replace him, and then the injuries and things like that. So a lot of people look at last year and think Derry, it was a poor season for Derry, and they killed off in the title chase and stuff like that. But if you look at it and put everything in perspective, like, they've made progress from the year before. They finished 13 points behind Rovers that previous season, 8 behind them last season. They went the furthest in Europe out of all the League of Ireland clubs. So there's been a progression there year on year. This year, in my opinion, I think they're more capable. Their squad's more capable. There's more balance in it. There's goals in it. And I just think if they steer clear of injuries, then I think that they'll run Rovers as close as anyone, So, but pressure, there's no doubt about it. Ruairi's under pressure. They at least close that gap in Rovers anyway.
You mentioned probably the major sign of the winter window, Pat Hooban. Is he? Do you think he could be the potential difference maker between, like you said, that maybe making up that 8-point gap? Like, we know when he's on form, he's probably is still the best finisher in the league, best goal scorer in the league.
Without a doubt, I think that's excited the fans more than anything, really, because that was lacking last year. You had the likes of Jamie McGonigal, and you had Cian Kavanagh there. You had Danny Mullen, who came in just midway through the season, and obviously Collie Whelan with his injuries are well documented. We missed him, who looked like such a talented player as well too. So goal scoring just was that let them down. That let Derry down last year. Pat Hooban, we all know about him. We know his stats. It's incredible, and he signed as well too, with definitely just speaking to him. And obviously, we all know, it was well documented, he didn't leave Oriel Park in good terms. So he's got the bit between his teeth. He looks sharp in pre-season. It's not just his goal scoring; it's his movement. It's his, he creates havoc in that box. And in terms of this, transition and they playing with Derry and the players around him, they're all perfectly they fit perfectly for him, in terms of getting the balls in the box. He's played alongside Mickey Duffy, Patrick McElhinney, Patching, and Dummigan, guys like that, and obviously Daniel Kelly as well too. So who played with last year. So it just all sort of it all makes sense, and I think if it all clicks, then he could definitely make a huge difference. Like he's one of the best strikers in the league still.
Were you surprised by maybe? Were you thinking maybe they might sign a few more players? Obviously, Kelly and Hooban come in, or it's just the nature of the squad that it is a settled squad now up in Derry, that there wasn't maybe the need for that many additions this year?
I think that's an advantage, that the fact that there hasn't been that much of a change, and Ruairi said from the outset they only wanted one or two, potentially three signings. He had earmarked those Daniel Kelly and Pat Hooban from a very early on as well too, so he wanted to get them done early. It just needed a wee bit of patchwork. Obviously, there was 4 outgoings. We have Brandon Kavanagh, who didn't really want to allow to leave. Brandon was a fantastic player. He really made a difference to it in times and games when they were struggling to break down teams. He was a kind of player himself, and like Jordan McAneff, who could open up defenses slightly, like or make those runs into the box later on, and so we didn't want to let Brandon go. Cian Kavanagh obviously didn't really had off. That he scored a couple of important goals, but just didn't get the game time. And Jamie McGonigal as well too. Just wasn't on his plans. You could see that from last season. So I think that's all it needed, was a wee bit of patchwork. And if you look at the squad, they're fairly it's fairly balanced. It's very competitive. There's probably 2 quality players for each position. So he's in a just steering clear from injuries. I think he's the squad's in a really good, strong position.
Were you surprised to let McGonigal go?
I wasn't. In my opinion, I would like Jamie to stay. I think he's a good player, definitely. He didn't, like, when he left, and I chatted him before he went to Corcoran, and afterwards, and he felt that he didn't get the best out of him, because basically he was playing he wasn't playing that number 9 role. He found himself being dragged out to the left or the right, and and then when the ball was getting into the box, he wasn't there, because he was linking up with, say, Mickey Duffy on the left or whatever, and he felt that maybe he should have scored more. He just didn't. His goal involvement wasn't as good as his previous seasons, and I can see why I wasn't surprised that he moved on, because he wasn't in the team as much as he would have liked. So I think for all parties involved, it was probably the best case scenario then that he had moved on. Obviously, with Pat Hooban coming in.
Is there any area of the squad you'd have a bit of concern over going into the season?
I think the attacking positions. I think there's a wealth of experience and talent there. Right across. And they can play. We forget Paul McMullen last year made a big impression coming over from Scotland, and he only played 6 months. Same with Danny Mullen. They look really sharp in pre-season as well. I think we're going to see the best of them this year with full pre-season behind them. They know the league more. They know their teammates better. But in terms of weaknesses, I would say, like, defensively, best defense in the league last year, along with Shelbourne. I don't think much has changed there. Obviously, you would like to think Mark Connolly's going to play a bigger part in more games this year too, which would only strengthen in that regard. Right back, maybe like Ronan Boyce is a great player. Like but I think there's potentially a bit missing there. Like there's that right back position. Cameron Dummigan can slot in there as well too, but I think he sort of take a wee bit away from his game when he does go in there. But I think it's in a relatively strong position, a healthy state, like definitely. So there's not too many weaknesses, not too many chinks in the armour.
How much of a hindrance do you think the pitch will play again this year?
That's the big question. And like there's nothing has changed in that regard. I don't think there is going to be anything changing in that regard for the foreseeable. So it just is what it is. The guys play on, like they train on a 3G pitch. They train at the Brandywell times as well too. So it's just something that they have to get on with. You know, that there's still there's sprinkler system, which is a big hindrance when it dries up, because it dries up pretty quickly as well too, and it stops them from playing their natural game as well too. So it's definitely a hindrance. Now the thing is, they need to make the Brandywell like that fortress again as well too. If they are going to win the league, teams can't come up and just sit on deep and Derry feel they break them down because they don't move it quick enough, or they don't be more adventurous enough. So they've got to get over that hurdle. They've got to find ways of rectifying it, because it was a huge issue. Not even talking about injuries. We know that the injuries that came from playing on it. So, and I know some of the players aren't big fans of playing it. Rory Higgins has gone on record; he's not a big fan of the pitch, but it's just something. It's just something that's they have to deal with. And can they make it in their favour? I'm not sure, but we'll see how it goes. Hopefully, they've got a better sprinkler system than a wheelie bin filled with water, and you know, which
is that what we do, actually? Is it a wheelie bin? Jeez.
Basically, and then they wheel it about, and they spray the water around the pitch. So that's how bad it is. Like they when they put the pitch and installed it, they should have had a sprinkler system of sorts on there, because that's holding them back.
Just on the injury front, Collie Whelan, is he anywhere near playing the first part of the season, or is he still long-term absence?
I'm not sure specifically, Luke, but I know it'll be a while before we see him. I would say, best case scenario, I would say like mid-season, you know. But hopefully I'm wrong. Haven't really spoken at any length to Ruairi about him. I've tried they get chatting. They call it himself, but he's reluctant to do anything, because basically, when he came back last year and he scored that goal against Cork, and then he scored in was the Pats in the next game at the Brandywell's first game at the Brandywell. There was such a buzz up. It had such a buzz about him, like, you know, because he had waited so long. You could see the relief, and you know, and then it all sort of happened again. So it was like he's kind of built himself up to come back, and then just devastation again. So I think he's very reluctant just to talk about it and put a date on it as well too, which is understandable.
Yeah.
But when he comes back, he's going to be like a new signing as well too. You know, I just hope he comes back as strong as he was before, and you know, he's got bags of quality.
Yeah, he's such a talent. In terms of then obviously aspirations for the year, is it too simplistic just put it as title or bust? Is it more the case that the fans want to see it, maybe a title race going to the end of the season rather than dipping off, say, in the final third?
Well, as I said, there's a lot of expectation here around because of the signings, and because they've been creeping ever closer as well. It's been 27 years and counting since they last won the league title, so it's on everybody's lips up here. They just want to get that over the line. With Paul Higgerty coming in as well too. I think we talk about Pat Hooman, but Paul Higgerty I think could make a major difference. You know, anytime he's obviously won the treble, he's won at 97 as well. Both times that Derry have won the League of Ireland top division, like he's been involved. He won the FAI Cup in 2012 along with Declan Devine as well too. So he's got that success behind him. He's going to be a great foil for Rory Higgins as well too. So I don't think it's won the title or bust. You know, I don't think it's going to cost Rory Higgins his job if he doesn't. as long as there's progress, as I said, and potential maybe run in Europe. But it has to get closer to Rovers. It has to be competitive, as you say, right to the end. It can't tail off, and I don't think it will if it can. Should they steer clear of injuries? I think it's 11v11. If you compare them to Rovers, I think they are just as strong.
Just on the Europe aspect, is there any pressure in Europe this year? Like, I know last year got third round, very unlucky at knockdown penalties. Is there again that kind of maybe aspiration to go far in Europe again? Maybe try get to the playoff round, maybe knockout stage or group stage rather.
Without a doubt, that'll be high up on Ruairi's list of priorities as well. Obviously, the Holy Grail's the league title, because Derry haven't won it in so long. But yeah, that's where the money's at, isn't it? And I know the board and the chairman are hopeful of another run in Europe. It's something that galvanizes the whole club. And actually, last year Derry were playing their best football during that period as well, and they really picked up momentum because of it. So. Yeah, it's going to be a huge thing, Europe. Obviously Derry have a great tradition too in Europe and going on runs as well. And last year we'll just have galvanized them further. I think it actually suits their style of play, Europe as well too. And they were the likes of Patrick McElhinney and Mickey Duffy, and they've all had that experience. So I would expect them. Depending on the draw, it's always the luck of the draw, isn't it, Luke? So I would expect them they go on another run as well too. But if you had a sacrifice a European run for the title, I think they would all pick that.
Who's the key man then for Derry this season?
Well, I get a lot of stick for being a fan of Patrick McElhinney. So, but Fats is just he's unreal talent. Like, see when he's on form, and obviously he had the operation in the Achilles last year. He played through the pain barrier for much of last season, but was still really needed him. He was that kind of talisman. Like, he just needed him, especially when they were trying to break down teams. And he's yourself, he's the kind of guy who can slot through. He's just a fantastic player. He looks really, really sharp in pre-season. He scored a fantastic free kick against Institute in the Ballykey Memorial Cup there in one of the friendly matches recently, and you can just see it. He looks like he's ready for it as well too. And if they're going to do anything, he needs to be fit and on the pitch.
Looking ahead then to Friday night, opening day of the season, from an outside point of view, probably can only see it going one way. After Derry win, what's your thoughts on the game?
I'd be confident that Derry get off to a good. They have to get off to a good start, But just watching them in pre-season and by all accounts that on Friday night at Oriel Park at behind closed doors game, they were really sharp. So they were. So I think that they'll do well. They'll win the game. Now Drogheda always make it difficult. They've come up last season and they've pulled out a few results as well too. They've recruited well. Kevin Doherty, obviously they've moved towards more of a full-time football as well there as well. But I just think I can't see anything but a Derry one. Obviously Perro from Athlone Town as well they've signed, so he's a handful, and they give Shane McElhinney a handful during the cup match as well too. So they are going to cause problems, but I think an early goal settle the nerves, and Derry should win and win comfortably. I made a prediction in our own podcast, and it was a 2-0 win for Derry. I would stick by that, be confident of that.
Simon, thanks as always. We'll chat again soon.
Cheers, Luke. Thank you.
Get in touch. You can email us at extratimelive@gmail.com or tag us on Instagram using the hashtag League of Ireland, or tweet us at Extratime News.
Let's do it.
And now we turn our attention to Drogheda United on the preview show. I'm delighted to say David Sheehan's with us again from LMFM. David, how are you?
Not too bad, Luke. Not too bad.
So the first thing to look at really is kind of beating the off season was, and maybe just towards the back end last year, the kind of investment coming into the club from Walsall. Do you see that having an impact on the year this year?
Yeah, I mean, you'd like to think so. It's something that's been in the works for like it's over a year in the making, really. If you listen to Conor Hoy, the previous chairman, and now Joanna Byrne, who's the chairperson at the moment. I mean, it's been a long time coming. Investment into the club, full stop, has been a long time coming. But this deal with Trevella, who, as you mentioned there, have a majority stake in Walsall. There was a lot of exploratory work was done with other investors, and eventually it came down to Trevella. And I know that everybody in Drogheda was very happy with what they heard from Trevella in terms of what they were going to do with the club and what their plans were. And I guess from Trevella's point of view, having spoken to a couple of the guys from there, as people will know, they're a US investment firm, so they really kind of wanted kind of do it slowly and do it properly. And the stadium is obviously one of the big issues that everyone wants to see getting off the ground. No pun intended on that, but they want to kind of get things moving. But they're not going to, throw a load of money at the first team and kind of ignore everything around it. That's what they're saying anyway. So I think everyone's been really happy with what's been said and what's come out of that. And clearly, the League of Ireland has a long history of investment not maybe going to plan, and maybe promises being made that weren't kept or whatever. So I think everyone's understandably cautious about this, but all the noises so far have been very positive. And I do think it'll be a positive thing for the club as the years go by. Obviously, the first thing they did was Kevin Doherty gave up his job as a postman and was able to go full time. And we know they're a part-time team officially, but I think I was reading a couple of pieces lately, and 6 or 7 of the Drogheda players don't do anything other than play football. So they're essentially full-time pros as well, even though the likes of Luke Heaney and a few others are working as well as playing football. So I think the Trevella thing is going to be a massive boost for the club. But it's not going to happen overnight, as you can see from the pre-season stuff. They haven't been like signing loads of big names and throwing loads of money around the place, but I certainly think it'll put the club on a more solid footing. And, in the next few years, as I said, the stadium is the one thing that everybody wants to see getting moving. But all the noises at the moment, anyway, are very positive. And as we'll touch on in a moment, like there's obviously going to be links there with Walsall. There's been a strong connection with Lincoln City, and that's not going to be jeopardised by this connection with Walsall either, we were told. So everything looks positive on that front at the minute. But again, time will tell with this,
Yeah, and I think you touched on it there. The major sign they probably made in the off-season was keeping Kevin Doherty and getting him onto a full-time contract. Just on the squad then, we'll start with the outgoings first. They have lost a couple of key players. Probably the ones that stand out the most would be Dale Rooney and Conor Keeley. They will be huge losses to that team. Yeah,
Dale Rooney and Conor Keeley absolutely will be big losses. I mean, Dale Rooney, was a player that Kevin obviously knew from his time at Shelbourne, came in from Shells and did so well at Drogheda for those few years. And you could see him like from year to year, just going from strength to strength. In every sense, he was getting bigger, physically stronger. His left foot of his, we've seen him banging some absolutely incredible goals, notably the one against St. Pat's last year at Richmond Park. So he was getting, a huge amount of assists, both from open play and from set plays. He was chipping in with a few goals. So I guess in the off season, if you were looking at players who were going to leave, Dale Rooney was probably top of the list, along with Conor Keeley, and I would have said Darragh Markey, but I've said that for a few years, and he's always stayed. So Conor Keeley and Dale Rooney certainly will be big misses. You look through the other players that they've lost. Luke Wade-Slater didn't really play a whole pile. Dylan Grimes did contribute last season, but then got injured and missed most of the second half of the season. Charlotte Jones played a few games left back. Kyle Robinson obviously came in, scored 5 goals over the time he was there across the league and cup, and then Jamie Egan, who didn't really play a whole pile either. So you could argue that the players they've lost, with the exception of Rooney and Keeley, haven't been, that won't necessarily be big misses for them. But yeah, those two players were instrumental. Conor Keeley last season in his one and only season with the club, and Dale Rooney for the few years he was there. They were key players. But this is the thing that happens. Every club in the league, but particularly Drogheda over the years, they've lost a raft of players every off season. And in fact, this is probably the season where they've lost the fewest amount of really key players, you could argue as well. So yeah, big misses, but I think they'll be able to cope with that with what they brought in.
Yeah, and on that, bringing players in, if you look through a couple of probably known players in the league that were highly regarded, like Jack Keane at UCD was probably the standout player for them last season. Andrew Quinn. So there is players they have brought into the club this year that again are Premier Division quality.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Jack Keeney, as you said there, I mean, he's probably been the standout player for UCD for a few years now and has previous experience in the league with Sligo. Has settled in. I was chatting to him there a few weeks ago at an event down in Drogheda. Settled in very, very quickly. He's living in a house out in Clorhead with France Piero and a couple of the other new signings. So he seems to have settled in really quickly. And I suppose the thing that we see with the League of Ireland is, let's say, for example, with Bohemians, where they bring in some of the Polish players, and some of them have worked out, and some others haven't. And across the league, players that come in from outside the League of Ireland, some will settle and some won't. But Jack Keeney, because he's been around the league for so long, like he should settle in straight away into that Drogheda defence. And we're led to believe they're going to play a back three with wing backs this season. So Jack Keeney will slot right in there. He'll be happy enough to do that. Andy Quinn is back from Shelbourne. Didn't get a huge amount of game time last season under Damien Duff, but he's back again. He's a player that I know Kevin Doherty liked and wouldn't have wanted to lose a couple of years ago, but he's back in as well, and he gives them an option at full back as well as centre back. So you've got Keeney and Quinn in defence, and then France Piero, I suppose, is the big name that they got in. A lot of clubs were supposedly vying for his signature, and 22 goals across the regular season and the playoffs last year for Athlone Town. So to get him in was a big coup, and really looking forward to seeing how he gets on. I think he's going to be a key player for Drogheda. And as with any striker, with any club, if you've got someone that's going to score goals, then you're going to do okay. We saw it with Freddie Draper last year. Was only there for the first half of the season on loan, scored 8 goals in that time, which was key in keeping Drogheda up. So I guess they're the big name players. So it's going to be interesting to see how all those guys get on, particularly Piero.
Yeah, and they've got into the loan market. We mentioned Freddie Draper was a huge success last year. Unfortunately, did go back to Lincoln in the off or in the summer. Just again, they've dipped into the loan market. They've got, if I'm right, they've brought 3 players in from Lincoln this year. I think that's right.
Well, they've got Oisin Gallagher and Hayden Khan in. So Hayden Khan centre back, Oisin Gallagher a midfielder, and I'm led to believe that Hayden Khan, Evan Weir and Jack Keeney will possibly be the centre of that defence, that 3-man defence for Drogheda when the season starts. So yeah, they've got Gallagher and Khan in on loan from Lincoln, and then they've got Evan Weir, who's on loan from Walsall, of course, having signed for Walsall in the off season. We talked about that tie-in with Walsall, and I guess it works both ways. You'll have players going across the way from Drogheda as well. So I suppose that's going to be a key thing as well, and it's always an interesting one for clubs in the league. We talked about Freddie Draper a moment ago. Sam Long and Sean Rowan a couple of years ago, they came in from Lincoln, left midway through the season. But, those players still contributed massively to Drogheda staying up. Sam Long and Sean Rowan, Freddie Draper obviously did likewise last year, along with Alicia Hui, who went back to Lincoln as well. So I guess it's how you cope with those losses. They're going to lose those 3 players in the summertime unless something out of the ordinary happens, and these players usually do go back to their parent clubs. You're going to lose Gallagher Khan and you're going to lose Evan Weir as well. So again, it'll be like it was last year, where Kevin Doherty brought in Kyle Robinson and he scores a few goals, and a few other players chip in. They managed to kind of survive without the likes of Freddie Draper. But I think every club that brings in loan players from across the water, they're always at the mercy of them being recalled at the very latest in the summertime when it's the off season in the UK. So I guess they just have to contribute while they're there, and then when the summer comes, managers can reassess in terms of bringing other players in. But that's just the nature of things in the League of Ireland, as you know, Luke. Like, it's players will come in on loan, and once they contribute while they're there, then that's all anyone can ask for. But it's going to be interesting to see how those 2 guys do from who have come in from Lincoln. But as we said earlier, like the evidence so far, which with Sam Long, with Sean Rowan, with Freddie Draper, with Alicia Hui, they've all been big successes. So there's no reason to think that Oisin Gallagher and Hayden Khan won't be likewise.
Do you think the squad is stronger this season, or is it weaker than previous years?
It's a difficult one. I think I was just looking down through the squad earlier, and I mean, again, looking at the players that left and who's come in, I think it's a little bit stronger across the board than it was last season. But it's very hard to tell because France Piero, as I said there, for example, 22 goals last season in the first division. Is he going to be able to hit the ground running in the Premier Division? Now, all the evidence, and there's not been much of it because there hasn't been too many games, but caused Dundalk a few problems a couple of weeks back in the Jim Malone Cup. The Leinster Senior Cup doubled up as two games to the price of one, essentially. Scored 2 goals that day, both were ruled out for offside, but was a handful. And the evidence would suggest, like, if you're scoring 22 goals in the first division, you'd imagine you'll be able to score, let's say, half that or so in the Premier Division. Now, that might not turn out to be the case at all, but who knows? But I think if he can fire the goals for them, like Freddie Draper did last season, and obviously France Pierre was there for the season, he's not on loan. Then I think Drogheda are looking like they're in good shape. Jack Keeney we talked about, Andy Quinn we talked about. Another interesting one is Killian Kayos, who's back from France. Was at Drogheda a couple of years ago. I saw him playing against Malahide United in the Leinster Senior Cup a couple of weeks back. A big physical presence. I expect him to feature a bit more this season. Then you have the likes of Matthew O'Brien and Warren Davis, who kind of made their breakthrough last year. Warren Davis was really kind of interesting player in that kind of number 10 role. Matthew O'Brien, who kind of came into the team a bit towards the end of the season and loves a shot from distance. He looks like a useful addition as well, coming through the ranks. And then you've got some of the under-20s coming through as well, who look like they might make a bit of a breakthrough this year as well. So I think, all in all, they've got a pretty balanced squad, Drogheda, and they look like they're in reasonable shape. But it's always so hard to tell, isn't it? Because we've seen this over the years with teams who look like they're well set and look like they have a decent squad put together. And, all it could take is maybe a player that's not in form or an injury. And, we talk about injuries, we talk about players that they need to keep fit. Gary Deegan, who's been an absolute colossus for Drogheda in midfield the last few years, and we were only chatting again in the off season a few weeks back to Gary, and we were talking about how he just keeps himself so fit, and he was touching wood that he wasn't going to get an injury, because he's been such a leader for Drogheda and barely misses a game unless he gets maybe a yellow card too many, but he rarely misses a game. I can't remember missing a game through injury since he's been there nearly. So he's another one that they'll need to keep fit, and a key player for them, and probably maybe the one player in that Drogheda squad that's as close to irreplaceable as you can get, Gary Deegan, because he's such a unique player and he's got such experience. But I think on the whole they're looking okay. I think they're looking reasonably good. And again, from chatting to Kevin Doherty a couple of weeks back, he seems pretty happy with where things are at with the squad. They got in Zishi Mbawa a couple of weeks back as well, a winger. So I think they're looking like they're okay. But it's just so hard to tell. Listen, we've been made fools of before with predictions in pre-season, and it's really hard to say.
Who would be the player you think then to look out for this season? Is it Perrault, the striker?
Yeah, I think Perrault, I suppose he's the obvious one. Everyone will be aware of him from last season. I think he's probably the obvious one to pick out. But I'll be really interested to see how Killian Kayos gets on now that he's back. He could be a real option for them to start. It depends what sort of system they're going to play. If they're going to play one up front with Darragh Markey in behind, or if they're maybe going to play two up top and then a couple of guys in behind them, then it's just going to be interesting to see. Like, it looks like it. Again, we're hearing it might be a 3-5-2. But it's hard to say how things will shake out in terms of the formation. And I mean, we've seen it over the years. Like, I think it was a couple of seasons ago, Drogheda started with a back three, and the start of the season didn't go well for them at all, and they switched to a back four then quite quickly, and things worked out a lot better. So best laid plans at the beginning of the season in terms of formations don't always work out. But I think Piero is the one everyone will be keeping an eye on. He's strong, he's quick, he knows where the goal is, he's a confident player, he's a really bubbly character as well, and he'll be a really good player to have around the club. I think he'll be a real fan's favourite. As I said, Killian Kayos, interesting to see how he gets on now that he's back. The two lone players, of course, as well, Gallagher and Clan, we'll have to see how they do. And as I said then as well, I think I'm really looking forward to seeing how Warren Davis kicks on this season, because he really made a big impression last year, mostly off the bench. But I think this year he'll start a lot more games than he did last year, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how he kicks on. But yeah, I think there's plenty of exciting names in that Drogheda squad. But as I say, it'll remain to be seen how things go for them. But I certainly think there's lots of names there to keep an eye on, and Drogheda fans will love watching as the season goes on.
Do you think the job Kevin Doherty doesn't get the credit he deserves for the work and kind of how, like, every year people kind of tip Drogheda as the team to go down, and yet, as you see, like they always get to that position between 6 and 7 to 8. Like, they're never really in danger of going down. I just wonder, does he get the appreciation maybe from outside of Drogheda that the job he's actually doing up there?
Well, he certainly gets it from within. That's for sure. Like, Kevin, everyone up there loves him, and like, Kevin is such an affable guy and such a likable guy, and nothing's ever too much trouble for him after games. We'll always chat. I've never seen him particularly annoyed after games, maybe an odd time, but generally speaking, he's always happy to talk, even if things haven't gone well. But in terms of outside the club, I think he probably has now, maybe not initially, but I think last season maybe was the time where people really started to sit up and take notice. And as we talked about off air, like, he was in the shake-up for Manager of the Year, and I know a lot of people thought he should have gotten that award, but But I think he does get the credit now. And I suppose the thing about it is with Drogheda that they've had, there's been a season or two that's gone by where their entire defence is almost gone. There was a year there where I think Jimmy Brown left, Connor Kane left to go to Shelbourne, Daniel O'Reilly left, David Odumosu left. So they've had to rebuild between him and Tim Clancy. They've had to rebuild the squad year on year, and I think people realise the job that Kevin has done, and the fact that he was doing it while holding down a full-time job as a postman as well was another thing that he had to contend with. But I guess it'll be interesting to see how things go from this year now that he's full-time. And I suppose with the full-time thing, maybe comes a little bit more pressure as well, and that'll come from within. Like Kevin is a very driven guy, and he'll want to do his best. But I think when you're kind of in a full-time role now, maybe people look at it differently and go, well, you're not part-time anymore, whatever. So it's a double-edged sword, I suppose, when you go full-time in a role, that maybe there's a little bit more pressure from within and from obviously outside as well. But I think he gets the credit. I think people know what sort of a job he's done there over the years. And as I said, particularly last season when Drogheda weren't really near the relegation zone at all. I think if I'm right, they might have been in the bottom two once after one round of games, and after that they weren't anywhere near it. So I think people kind of realise what a good job he's done, and he's been rewarded for that with that contract as we talked about. So I think people understand what a job Kevin has done there, and what a really good manager he is.
What's the hopes then for the season with Drogheda? Is just again mid-table consolidation, maybe a cup run?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose. Again, we talked about it off air. It's just really hard to say because you look at the other teams in the division, okay, with the exception of Derry, Shamrock Rovers, Pats, Shelbourne, I suppose, as well. But then Shelbourne have Europe to contend with. So, you look at the likes of Drogheda United, Dundalk, Sligo, Waterford, Galway, and maybe Bohemians as well. It's hard to say how those are going to go this year. But if you even just take, say, Dundalk, Drogheda, Sligo, and the two teams that were promoted, you could throw those cards down on the table and they could land any which way, and you wouldn't be surprised, really. I don't think anyone necessarily expected Sligo to be dragged into a relegation battle last year, albeit they were never really seriously in trouble. And we know they sold Max Mata when maybe they thought they were safe, but. How are Waterford and Galway going to do coming up? Are they going to be strong enough to keep themselves out of trouble? It's really hard to know. So I think that those bottom five clubs that I just mentioned, they could land in any order you like, and there could be a surprise package in there. Like Dundalk's signings could all be really good, and they could end up in the top four or whatever. So really difficult to say. I suppose with the investment, maybe now Drogheda need to start looking towards mid-table and pushing on a little bit and keeping themselves out of that bottom two, and not even kind of considering being in that situation. But I do think the league this season is a lot stronger than it was last year. Obviously, the UCD were rock bottom the whole way through the season, and Cork City really struggled. So I think this season is going to be a lot more competitive in terms of that relegation scrap. But I do think that Drogheda are well enough equipped to be looking at, maybe a 6th or 7th place finish again. But, come back to me at the end of the season. I could be completely wrong on that.
Looking ahead then to Friday night, it's probably one of the tougher ties to get, the Brandywell opening day of the season. It's a good result, maybe a 0-0, 1-1 draw.
Oh, I think a draw would be a great result away from home against Derry. I mean, it generally would be. I mean, we know they picked up wins there in recent times. The 1-0 win was it last season, I think, when Alicia Hui scored the winner early in the season. So, yeah, it's going to be tough. And I think, the Pat Hooban signing could be the decisive one for Derry in terms of finally getting their noses across the line for the title. But, we talk about managers, we talk about pressure. Like Ruairi Higgins is certainly going to be under pressure to start the season well. So, I think it's going to be a tough one for Drogheda. And, we talk about the amount of players that come in, and this is true of every club, but the first few games of the season, when you're trying to bed players in, you're trying to figure out your best formation, you're trying to see who's in form, who's fit enough, who's confident. It's always a little bit of a lottery to an extent on the first few games, because the pre-season really probably doesn't tell you a huge amount about what's going to happen when the league does start. So I think certainly a draw for Drogheda on the road against Derry would be a good result for them, be a great result for them. But I think as well, Kevin will be looking for a good performance. He'll be looking at the formation. He'll be looking at how players are settling in, because you can't afford to get off to too slow of a start. And if things need to be tweaked, they need to be tweaked fairly quickly. So I think certainly a draw would be a good result for them. But they've been up there and won before, as we said. So, and with Piero up front for them, so don't rule out a surprise win for Drogheda. But I think certainly if you offered Kevin Doherty a point now, I would imagine he would take it. But yeah, certainly a tough start for them, you'd imagine. And for myself going up there, good trip to get out of the way at the start of the season and not be back up to Derry for a while, because it's a long out slog. But ground I always enjoy going to the Brandywell, and really looking forward to it. But yeah, a point I think would be a good result for them. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see how it goes in terms of the performances of the new players that have come in and how things bed down. And yeah, keep our fingers crossed that they can get a result.
If they hit you for a score prediction?
Oh, I'm going to go for. I'm going to be reasonably optimistic and say 1-1, because I do think I think Derry there'll be some opening night nerves up there as well. And again, as I said, it's true of every team sort of settling in and hitting the ground running isn't always easy at the start of the season. So I think Drogheda, with the players they brought in and with the experience of the league that the likes of Jack Keeney have, and the players that have been there for the last couple of seasons, I think they're reasonably well equipped. So yeah, I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw on that one.
David, thanks for coming on. We'll chat again soon.
No problem, Luke. Thanks a million.
Get in touch. You can email us at extratimelive@gmail.com or tag us on Instagram using the hashtag League of Ireland, or tweet us at Extratime News.
Let's do it.
And now we turn our focus to Dundalk, and I'm delighted to say James Rogers joined us. James, how are you?
Oh, good. Look, yeah, looking forward to getting going. Yourself?
So, James, looking at Dundalk from an outside point of view, a lot of noise off the field in terms of change of ownership on the field, a lot of changes too. How do you think Dundalk are set for the league opener this weekend?
Yeah, look, it's hard to know. As I say, Dundalk have made 9 new signings so far, which is a lot of change. We expect 1, possibly 2 more, so that'll be 11. It's a raft of changes. You've lost a bit of experience in terms of, Patrick Hooven's gone, Daniel Kelly's gone, even the likes of Keith Ward is gone. So it's, a lot of change in a year. And I think with the exception of maybe Dara Keane, they're all largely outsiders to the league. Obviously, Robbie Mahan would have played a little bit of Bowes, only something like 5 appearances, but a lot of sort of new faces to the league. And, you're kind of going to have some hits. You're probably going to have some misses. And it's just you're probably hoping that there's more hits than misses. But there's a lot of factors, obviously, that goes into that in terms of how well they settle, off the field as well as on it. So they're a bit of an unknown quantity at the moment, like even in pre-season, just looking at them. Some of the new lads, the fans and even media, etc., haven't seen them play at all. They're still doing a bit of business, so the squad's not fully complete as yet. So it's hard to know what to sort of expect from the Dundalk in terms of on the field this year.
Yeah, I might just chat about maybe the outgoings first. You mentioned someone there, Daniel Kelly, Pat Hooven, like they're huge losses for any dressing room, and losing probably some of those key players in the off season could. They're hard to replace.
Yeah, well, I suppose if you look at it, you've lost, as well as Hubert and Kelly, which went to Derry, John Martin's gone to Shells. They were your 3 top goal scorers of last season. And like, as any team will tell you, it's a hard league to score goals. And like, you think like the top scorers in recent years, it's not like anyone's hitting 20 on a consistent basis or anything like it. So first and foremost, can you replace the goals? And then obviously they've lost Nathan Shepherd, which is their goalkeeper. So it's 2 big areas of the pitch at either end where you've lost sort of key individuals. They've signed Ross Monroe from Scotland, a goalkeeper, limited sort of experience to date. They are still looking for another goalkeeper to come in. So look, that situation might change depending on who that is. But it's 2 sort of areas where you're a bit unproven, and for that reason, that's part of the reason there's sort of question marks over Dundalk going into the league for me, because easier said than done. Dundalk have had experience in recent years of trying to replace a long-standing goalkeeper with a bit of failure, let's say, and even you look at where Rovers are now, but like pre-Alan Manus coming back, they had their share of misses as well in that position. So it sometimes I think in goal it can be a case of better the devil you know, especially if you're not bringing in someone with a lot of first team experience, and especially when you're bringing in someone who, as I say, has changed the country and has that to adapt to as well. So yeah, they're big losses. we could be sitting here come the summer and saying, well, they're upgrades, and from a Dundalk perspective, hopefully they are, but we don't know that at this stage.
Yeah, and I think it's well documented that Steve O'Donnell does go into the Scottish market, a good bit of players, 4 or 5 Scotsmen in the squad. Cameron Elliott, we mentioned there, or you mentioned off air as well, hasn't hit the heights possibly with Dundalk since coming in. Is there a risk, maybe too much of a risk, to have kind of these unknown quantities in your squad, replacing the likes of the Shepherds and replacing the likes of the Hoobans and the Kellys?
Yeah, to be fair to Dundalk, I don't think there's much options. I think Stephen O'Donnell would nearly every year he's been at Dundalk has probably had one hand tied behind his back due to things going on off the field, and obviously one of the big talking points over the winter was obviously the change of ownership at Dundalk, and that sort of delayed things. So they were a little bit behind. As I mentioned, Darragh Keane from UCD is the only player signed from within the League of Ireland, and to be fair, you look around at players who are available. They obviously did target others, but they couldn't or didn't get them. And you look around and it's hard. So you've no option but go outside the league, and you are hoping I suppose last year Archie Davies made the PFAI Premier Division Team of the Year. He was the Dundalk Player of the Year, and you're hoping to unearth someone like that can be a real success for you. I just think, like I say, that the concern I'd have looking at the team, and look, 3-4 matches in, it might not be a concern, but at this stage, I would say, I just wonder where the goals are going to come from, because in pre-season they haven't been scoring a lot, and they also haven't kept a clean sheet. So, as I said, both ends of the pitch, where it's important, there's been massive change, and at the moment, no real sign that. But again, I would preface that with saying, they've signed the likes of Jamie Gullen, they've signed the likes of Kieran McGuckin as well on loan, 2 strikers, and I personally haven't seen them in action yet. They've played a couple of matches behind closed doors, but I think that's the general Dundalk support or fear at the moment, is just where the goals are going to come from.
Yeah, and I suppose, look, on the positive side, if you look at it, the spine of the team, they still have Robbie Benson, Darragh Horgan is back full pre-season, Andy Boyle's still there, John Mountney's back fit, club captain, Louis Ainsley's been a good signing for him, you mentioned Archie Davies. So despite all that, I suppose we've mentioned the negatives there, the unknown quantities, there is still the core of a very good side there if those players stay fit.
Yeah, and that's the big question, if they stay fit. Robbie Benson for me is still one of the best midfielders in the league. He just hasn't had an ability to put a run of games together. Even I remember being towards the end of last season over in Sligo, and for about 40 minutes he was by head and shoulders the best player on the pitch, and then pulled up. He's, to be fair to him, he's had a pre-season without incident this year, and if he can get a run of games, it's almost like a new signing, and what a player he is. Darragh Horgan, you mentioned, he came in sort of midway through last year for one reason or another. He hadn't been playing up a lot before he came, but I think he has the potential to really kick on. Not that he did badly, but when he came, far from it. But I think can go with another level or two, and hopefully we see that in this season. And like that, Andy Boyle probably missed a few matches last year, but the Dundalk record with him in the side as opposed to without him was huge. And there's probably going to be potentially a young centre half beside him, in Zach Bradshaw at times this season, or even someone who's in their second season now, like Hayden Muller, and his experience alongside them, particularly when you factor in a new goalkeeper as well, could be huge. So they're key. And you mentioned John Mountney as well. It's hard to buy that experience of lads who've won, in some cases, 5 league titles. So that's one thing that the Dundalk maybe have going for them in terms of that experience, around the camp, and hopefully it can prove important.
You were saying to me there, you've seen a few times in pre-season. Have any of the players stood out, in particular new players? Have they looked like they settled in from what you've seen?
To be honest, I probably haven't seen them enough to properly judge. I mean, the games I would have seen where they played Longford, which was a defeat, Malahide, which was on a, I suppose, with all due respect, probably a lower caliber of opposition, but played in an absolute sort of hurricane monsoon conditions. and then a draw of the match. I think Robbie Mahan has looked electric at times in terms of pre-season, and looks like he could be a real handful. But the rest, like some of them I haven't seen at all. They obviously signed Scott High, a midfielder unknown from Huddersfield Town, has played around 60 matches in the Championship. Haven't seen him at all yet. Haven't seen the two strikers yet. So, there's a lot still to sort of cull in terms of, players who could be, vital in terms of the season. Even, as I mentioned, Dara Keane's the one addition from within the League of Ireland, but I actually haven't seen him play for Dundalk yet because he picked up a bit of a knock, which meant he missed those matches. They have played some games behind closed doors as well against the likes of Shells, UCD and Derry. So, they're probably behind the scenes a little bit further on than what I or other fans have seen. But, in terms of making judgments on people, it's probably much too soon to say who's good, who's looking good or who isn't.
Owen Kenny is a player that's kind of cropped up recently in the news, and he scored obviously in the Senior Cup. Could he be part of the feature this season for Dundalk?
Potentially. Look, it's a big step up for a guy doing his leaving cert to come in and particularly in a striker position. We mentioned how hard it is to score goals, but he's had a good pre-season. Is there a difference in doing this in some of the pre-season games as opposed to when it really matters? Potentially. So that remains to be seen. And there's also probably at least 3 strikers on the books, which you'd have to say is ahead of him right now. But certainly I like the look of what he can offer. He's quick over the opening few yards. He's big and tall. Like, he definitely offers a lot of pace, and certainly in pre-season, even in the games he wasn't scored in, he was a real threat. So I think he's another option. Certainly in terms of the academy structure, and I think that could be important for Dundalk, because one of the criticisms you'd have had of Dundalk, even when they were winning league titles, was they probably weren't bringing players through. But this guy's he's as good as a local. I know he was born in Derry, grew up in Donegal, but he's been living probably certainly since before his teens in Blackrock, just outside Dundalk. He's grew up here. Obviously, everyone knows who his dad is and that. But he certainly has huge potential, and I think Dundalk would love to see, if not him, then someone else certainly try and break through into the first team, because it's probably long overdue.
Yeah, and there was if I'm correct, Brown, wasn't there a young lad made his debut in 15 or 16, made his debut in the Senior Cup as well?
Yeah, Luke Mulligan has come out. He was the youngest for about 2 weeks. It was beaten by a guy called Vincent Leonard, but that was to be fair, the under-20s played Bowes under-20s and that, so that probably not the same. But yeah, Luke Mulligan is someone who was given a pro deal and has looked really good in the dispatches we've seen him. Unfortunately for him, he's playing at right back, and as I mentioned, Archie Davies came in last year, was probably Dundalk's best player, and John Mountney coming back also wants to play right back. So these lads might have to be patient, but look, it's like anything. If you're good enough, you'll get your chances, hopefully. And it's a long season. There will be injuries, there will be suspensions, and it's about taking your chance if and when it comes.
Who's the big player, the key player to look out for Dundalk this year? Like, who's someone that you'd look to and say he needs to have a big season?
I think, and I sort of touched on, is Robbie Benson, because for me, I think the midfield was a sort of an area where the Dundalk could have improved on. Last season, they've obviously lost the likes of Greg Sloggett in there as well. Shannon Mullen was a player coming through the academy system, only played 4 games towards the end of the year, but an Irish under-19 international. He's gone to Torino as well, and I think if Benson can stay fit, for me, he brings you that sort of, he's kind of like an all-rounder. He can win the ball back, he can create things, he can score goals, and again, he's like a new signing, but the big question about him is, can he stay fit? Every Dundalk fan is hoping he can, but as I say, very early days, but it's probably his first proper pre-season in a while, and he's looked good, and I think he could only get better in terms of if he can get a run of games under his belt. So I think one of the new signings, we don't know enough about them. They may become the star man, but I think looking at the squad in general, I think if Benson can stay fit, it's a massive boost for the Dundalk.
I don't think we've ever chatted and not spoke about the off the field stuff going on at the club. obviously you mentioned touching there, but the new ownership. How is the club now in terms of obviously another ownership transfer to someone else? Is it steady now, or is there still issue in the background? Like what's your take at the moment?
Yeah, look, there's a lot to be done at Dundalk. By this time next year, the club have to replace their pitch. They have to replace their floodlights. That's non-negotiable in terms of just literally getting your license. There's a lot of debt there, probably inherited as well. So that has to be done. But it's probably not what you want to hear when you're doing a general League of Ireland show, because you're probably looking for predictions on how teams are going to do. For me, I would probably accept, a mid-table finish right now if it meant that things improved off the field, because again, you hark back to the recent past with Dundalk, and you had great times under the likes of Stephen Kenny in particular, and they were wonderful, but there's absolutely no legacy to show from them. Like I'm open to correction this, I don't even think there's a picture of Stephen Kenny in the ground, and he went on to become Ireland manager. And they're wonderful things and wonderful memories, and look, ultimately all our fans of any club, they want that success, they want their big days out, etc. But for me, I would accept a sort of middle of the road season, maybe a couple of middle of the road seasons, if it meant that things were progressing off the field, because I think it's well documented at this stage that Oriel Park isn't fit for purpose, and we're not expecting a magic wand of a brand new stadium in the next 2-3 years, but you can still improve on what's there, and I think there is probably more so with one eye on next season, just because of the time it took, but little things that can be done to improve that. So, for example, he is going to look, Brian Ainscough is going to look into the possibility of, say, like temporary stands going behind the goal, which would house the away fans, for example, which, it's been an ongoing criticism of Oriel. There would be something similar, hopefully, for home fans as well, replacing the likes of seats, etc. Again, these are probably more looking towards the 2025 season than this year, but you have to start somewhere, and look, we all know its deficiencies, but that doesn't mean you can't improve it a little bit by bit, and even toilet facilities, etc., that are regularly criticised. So I think stabilising the club in that way and giving it a more of a platform, because I think the Dog have had great success over many decades, but it's sometimes you just have to say, right, well, we need to do a step back here and not be as focused on, what makes a good year. Is it where your first team finishes? It is always going to be to an extent, but long term, your facilities and how you're set up as a club is probably more important than that.
You think the fans, though, would accept that if it's a case of taking one step back on the pitch to help the club off the field? Is that something fans would accept, maybe a 5th, 6th finish without looking like European football?
It's difficult in terms of, for what it's worth, the owner has come out and said he thinks they can compete for Europe. So, I mean, it's not like they're completely parking any ambition. I just mean that, in terms of the grand scale, and look, these things would need to be communicated right to supporters to get behind, because like any club, listen, we're all excited about the start of a new season and hope that we all have our hopes and dreams and all that. Like, there's going to be, someone's going to have a bad year, and you'll see things like attendances drop off for that club, etc. But I just think it's more important now, because you can't keep being solely focused on a first team, and neglect everything else, because there's no doubt that everything from the club's place in the community and everything suffered, and it's hard to rebuild those bridges and those cracks when they appear, and there is a bit of rebuilding to be done in that regard. But to be fair to Brian Ainscough, and I've only spoken to him a handful of times, he's definitely talked a good game up to now. His heart definitely seems in the right place, and I think it's sort of following through on those aims now and making it better, because I think it's very much, the Dog probably needs like a GA parochialness to it at the moment, where if you look at any county has any amount of teams, and only one team can win your senior championship, your intermediate, your junior, or whatever, but there's more that makes it successful, and that could be like, right, do we develop the academy, which for too long hasn't produced? Do we develop the facilities? Even, as I say, no one's expecting you can't click your fingers and get a new stadium, but it doesn't mean you can't improve little by little on what's there. So, if we get to that point, I think that for me is a term of success. That said, as you say, you don't want to, see that happen and maybe get relegated in the process. I'm not saying the Dundalk are going to get relegated, of course, but there is a balancing act to be done in terms of getting it right on both sides. As I say, there's a lot of, I think I said to you off air, probably Dundalk are one of the most unknown quantities in this league. They're obviously first game away to Shamrock Rovers on the opening night. I think no matter what he does, there's probably going to be new faces in that team that are unknown to the league. We'll all have a bit of intrigue in terms of what they can produce, and some could surprise you. Life being life, there will be signs that don't work out, but we sort of don't know what we're going to get in terms of on the field, and that will emerge in due course. But yeah, I just think off the field, for too long it's taken a back seat at Dundalk and not given the priority it needs. But so far so good. They've brought in like commercial team from Halpin Sport, to even bring in the likes of sponsorship and improve that experience of it. So, it's small shoots at this moment, but I just love to see them growing on throughout the year.
Yeah, and just you touching it there. My last question is the game on Friday night. Look, you it's probably the one game you wouldn't pick for your first game of the season going away to Tala. How do you see the game going? Is a draw the result you want there?
Yeah, like it's a difficult one. I suppose maybe it's the time to get Rovers. I probably would have said that with more confidence before seeing the President's Cup. But they did. Like, I mean, last year Rovers started slow. They have started slow in the past, but they look pretty good against Pats in the President's Cup, if you can judge it on that. There's still a bit of settling in to do with this Dundalk side. As I said, we're talking here on Monday afternoon. There could be players signed between now and then who are in the team, so it's very hard to judge what exactly is it's going to be. But it's probably as difficult a start as you can get. But if you can, like hypothetically, if you can get a draw or even a win, it really sets you up. I think Dundalk, looking at the early fixtures, because I think it's expected overall to be a very tight league this year. There's no obvious sort of last place team, with all due respect to UCD last year, but they've a horrendous sort of away run of fixtures in the opening period, where they've, after over to Bowes, I think it's Pat, Shells and Derry are the first 5 away fixtures, and Dundalk's away form under Stephen Donal hasn't been great over his 2 seasons at the club up to now. Whereas if you look at the home fixtures, they've Galway, Waterford, Sligo and even Drogheda, and they're the games you need to be sort of winning, really, because Oriel has been a bit of a fortress and somewhere that has been difficult to go to. But if you're going to improve your away form, we're better to do it than Tal on the opening night. So in a way, it's a sort of good time to get Rovers, I think. Maybe opening night when everyone's up for it and hopes are high, but definitely you'd have to make them the favourites. They look really good against Pats, as I say, and I think they're probably the most settled when you look at the signings they made, like the likes of Trevor Clarke, who obviously was brilliant. Like he's effectively coming back to the club. Aaron McAniff is a new signing in one way, but he's been there before, so it's as close as the idiot proof to anything. So I think you have to make Rovers favourites on Friday, and I think you have to make them favourites for the title overall come the finish.
Let's hit you for a score prediction then.
I lean, like, I'd have to go head over heart here. I think Rovers will win it. I'd say maybe 2-0, and that's just being realistic. I just think they're, I think of all the teams, they're probably the most settled, along with maybe Derry. They've the least betting in to do, and look, it's going to be a big night in Tala. They're at home, going for the 5 in a row. New stand. I know it was open for the President's Cup, but this is the first. Yeah, I think there was restrictions on it, whereas it's going to be full. So they'll be looking for a big home crowd on the night, and obviously they took that. Was it the 7th game, ironically, against Dundalk? It took them to get that first win last year. I think they'll be looking to put that right on the opening night this year.
So the head's telling you 2-1. What's the heart saying? 1-1.
I'd love to think the Dundalk could get a result. And I genuinely mean this, and probably not what you want when you're asking someone on for a view on Dundalk. It's really hard to know what you're going to get from Dundalk this year at this stage, because as I say, we just haven't seen enough of them. There's so many new players that are, we like everyone else, but only really Google them at this stage rather than actually seeing them play. So they could surprise a few people. They really could, but that remains to be seen.
James, as always, thanks very much. I know we'll chat again soon.
No worries. Cheers, Luke.
Get in touch. You can email us at extratimelive@gmail.com or tag us on Instagram using the hashtag League of Ireland, or tweet us at Extratime News.
Let's do it.
And now we turn our attention to Galway United. Delighted to say Paul Corcoran's with us. Paul, how are you?
All good, Luke. Yep, thanks for having me.
So, I suppose first thing to say really about Galway is back in the big time Premier Division. They've looked to carry the momentum in from last season into this year.
Yeah, that's for sure, Luke. Look, it was 6 long years down in the first division after relegation. So, I suppose the main target. I mean, I think maybe some of the fans are maybe getting a bit of carried away with themselves, maybe with the good performance in the first division last year and in the FA Cup. But I would presume the main target in the camp now is just keep the performance levels up and consolidate a nice, secure position in the Premier Division this year, and build from there. But certainly, yeah, I imagine keep the momentum going, and they're well set up because they kept a good chunk of the squad from last year. So hopefully, we'll see how things go.
Yeah, and that was actually my next thing really to mention, was that if you look at the squads and the makeup of it, a lot of the players that earned the promotion have stayed on board for this season.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think maybe looking on and just judging maybe the fan sentiment over the off season, I think maybe there was a bit of maybe mild frustration that there's no head turning signing necessarily during the off season, but they've very quietly signed most of the squad from last year, and even looking at say the players that have left the club, a few young guys have gone out maybe on loan and maybe left, which is good for their development. I mean, I don't know if some of them are gone permanently, unfortunately, but they have to go and get first team football. But there's maybe only one or two that I think fans would look on and be a bit disappointed to lose. But yeah, they've kept a lot of that squad from last year. Now, then again, look, the big question is, you do have some decent Premier Division experience in, the likes of Brendan Clarke and Conor McCormack. Obviously Rob Slevin, Regan Donlan have all played Premier Division. But I suppose the question is, there's there's a string of really talented players who did really well last year, but can they make the step up now to the Premier Division? Because it'll be important basically for those players to adapt and improve if Galway United are going to consolidate a good position in the Premier Division.
Yeah, and look, speaking of incomings, I suppose the major signs probably be Gary Buckley, Leo Gaxa, Carl Sullivan. They become the 3 players that stand out possibly.
Yeah, I definitely think Gary Buckley and Carl Sullivan. It's just good to get additional Premier Division experience in there. Obviously, Gary Buckley worked with John Coffey for a long time already, so he knows. I think judging by the way they did the signings, I'm presuming they sat down and they wanted a decent bit of continuity and the right kind of type of player and mentality. And I suppose Gary Buckley can come in, and Caulfield knows him, and Buckley will know what a John Coffey team is all about. So same with Carlo Sullivan, who I understand has done quite well in pre-season. And Gaxa will be an interesting one, just because I know he's coming from Kerry, and there were by some distance the team that struggled the most across the 2 divisions last year, but I think he scored something like 7 goals for them last year. So he's obviously a talented player, and it'll be interesting to see if he gets that opportunity to develop and improve even further. So he could be a little diamond in the rough for United. I suppose in terms of maybe other incomings, I suppose it'll be interesting to see how Janot Esua does. I don't know if I'm saying that completely right, but he's coming in from the Finnish league at right back, and then Al-Amin Kazim is coming in on loan from Colchester. Kazim has he's a decent amount of senior appearances. He's not he's not an academy player, having just played under 23 football in England. So he's coming in with a decent amount of appearances under his belt. And then importantly, those 2 players. So I don't know, has he been officially unveiled, but I think Colm Horgan's re-signed as well. So that means we've got by the sounds of two strong players in both full-back positions, and then Conor O'Keefe as well is still there, who can play either side to back up that as well, which it was tricky. Like last year, the two, Galway United had an almost perfect season, really, but one of the kind of maybe weaker elements of the squad was that Regan Donal and Colm Horgan went down with injury for much of the season, and there wasn't really a lot of strong backup in those positions. So they seem to have strengthened there, which is hugely positive. I suppose on incoming as well, maybe one area that I think might be a weakness for Galway United, and it might be a problem for them going forward, is up front. They haven't really recruited strongly there. There was talk of different strikers meant to come in, and for whatever reason, they didn't manage to get a deal over the line. I think Tom Costello's come in from Coventry. He's a bit of an unknown quantity. Like I'm not sure if he has many senior appearances. Certainly not at a high level in England. I don't think even in the Football League anyway. So after that, then it's just you have Stephen Walsh there, still brilliant. Like he's still exceptionally fit, and he'll press players. But like Stephen Walsh, 34, like he's not going to improve. And maybe a weakness coming into Fridays. And I haven't seen the club say, but my understanding is that Wasim Aoushria is possibly injured for Friday. So, they're in a bit of a pickle in that final, that kind of someone to lead the line, at least in the short term. Now, if Wasim comes back, great, because I think, Wasim's only 23, so I think he's one of those players that I mentioned will develop and improve with a few games in the Premier Division under their belt. But certainly that's probably the only area of real concern I think Galway United have at this stage of the season anyway.
And just on Wasim Aoushria, I know he was very successful in the first division. Do you think he has the quality to be a Premier Division striker to get those 10 to 15 goals, which would be vital for Galway to survive this year?
But that's the thing, 10 to 15 goals. Like it's amazing how much of a premium League Ireland strikers are.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think he can adapt. Like I watched him. I suppose the performance I remember in my head is against Bohemians in the FAI Cup semi-final last year, and I thought he did really well. Turned on his heel to get beyond a striker a few times and got dragged down in the process because he just left your man for dead. So it'll be interesting. I don't know. It would be quite enough to get 10 to 15. But I think he'll improve as the season goes on. I think he has that in him. Now, that's it. We'll see if he's fit now in the short term. I don't know if he'll definitely be fit very early on in the season, and maybe what effect not having a full pre-season might have on him in the next couple of months. But I definitely think he'll improve as the season goes on, and I think he'll be an important player for Galway.
In the goalkeeping department's interesting because they brought in Joe Wright from Millwall. Obviously, Brendan Clarke, well-established goalkeeper in his league, 38, 39 now, near the back end of his career. Is Brendan Clarke still going to be number one this season, or is Joe Wright now coming in as the number one keeper for the year?
No, my understanding is I'd say it'll be Clarke still as the number one choice. I suppose I'm presuming, in fairness to John, obviously he's consistently looked for a strong number two, so he hasn't just gone, by default to the under 19 goalkeeper. So he's looked for someone with, maybe a bit more development on, in their career and maybe a bit more experience. But I imagine it'll be Clarke. And it's interesting. I suppose I was listening to the podcast there at the weekend, and I think it was you maybe who had the stat about no goalkeeper under, I think was it 28 has won the Premier Division for X number of years. And so I just imagine, I think Clarke's experience in the Premier Division it's been a long career. I imagine, there's no doubt in my mind that I think he'll be between the sticks on Friday night against St. Pat's, and I imagine for much of the season.
Yeah, I have to credit that was Tom O'Connor actually very stat in the goalkeeper.
Tom O'Connor. Good stat. Yeah,
it was a great stat. Yeah. Outgoings then, is there any player that Galway fans disappointed has left the club?
So I suppose looking at the list, I'd say that there's definitely been a disappointment that some of the younger players have gone. Now, Grant, I know some of them are loan deals as far as I know, but to the likes of young David Tarmy, who, I know he had an injury for I think a good chunk of last year, but he made his debut in 2022, I believe, and there was a lot of talk about him at the time. He's kind of a player for the final third. John Culp seemed quite interested in him, and he signed a full-time deal, so He's gone off to Treaty. Darren McCarthy's gone off to Kerry, as has Stephen Healy. So there's probably a bit of disappointment that the young lads haven't stayed to develop their career further or get appearances. But if they come back to the club, I presume John Coffey and Ollie Horgan's idea is that, I suppose, for first season back in the Premier, you want me battle hardened lads, to be able to. I don't want to say, I'm hoping that it won't be in a relegation dogfight, but you want lads maybe who are maybe a bit more developed and know what they're doing, and not to be maybe risking young guys who hopefully now get valuable first team experience in the different clubs they've gone to this year.
There's a couple of injuries. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, I suppose for myself, one player on that list that kind of left that I might be a little bit disappointed, especially given that I think Galway are quite light up front, would be Wilson Ruairi. So, Wilson went off on loan to Cove Ramblers last year. I think he scored about 12 goals for them, and he did quite well. And he led the line. And I always thought, he's a very talented striker. Sligo have given him a 2-year contract coming into this season. Look, it's a great opportunity for him. And he might well make Galway United rue the day that they let him.
Just on the injury front as well, coming into the year, is there injury doubts around kind of two of their key players from last year, Morris Nugent and Conor McCormack?
So yeah, look, it's hard. I mean, I know I mentioned Wasim in that bracket as well. It's kind of tricky to know. I'll be honest with you, you don't often get a lot of detailed injury reports. So it's unclear. I've heard the likes. I know Conor McCormack definitely had a disrupted pre-season with some kind of a knock, and I've heard kind of similar about Morris Nugent as well. So it's not clear to me basically how fit the entire camp is, but by the sounds of it, there are a few injury concerns coming into the early part of the season, definitely.
What then, for a Galway fan, I suppose, is a good season? Is it just simply this year consolidate, get 8th place? Would that be kind of the acceptable bar for Galway fans coming back in the Premier Division?
I think, and look, maybe it's because I'm so jaded and I've been around for such a long time, Luke, but I suppose I look at it. I mean, I think, you're nearly looking at two separate competitions in the Premier Division this year to a certain degree, and that top half and that bottom half, and it'll be extremely competitive. I don't envisage any single team being way weaker than the rest like there was last year with UCD. So I suppose where I'm sitting now, I think a very successful season for Galway would be an 8th place finish. I think the highest Galway finish since they came back into the league in 2014. I think, did they finish in 7th place in 2015 or 2016 maybe? But so an 8th place finish, and guaranteed Premier Division football in 2025. I think that's all you can ask for, and then build from there.
How important is John Coffey and Ollie Horgan to the year?
I think, I often think, like, look, John obviously has been there and done that, and he's won everything as a player and a manager and did really well at Cork. I often think there's no coincidence that Ollie Horgan came in last year, and it was almost like a switch was flicked. And look, I think they recruited better last year anyway. But Ollie Horgan coming in, I think both are very important characters behind the scenes. I think, listening to interviews of players last year during the cup run and stuff like that, I think just that level of experience, especially as I said, for me, obviously, a good season, be finishing 8th. I think you need John, who's won the league, but like his right hand man at the moment is Ollie Horgan, a man who possibly overachieved with Finn Harps for a long time. So I think that kind of experience is just crucial. And then that coupled with a few older heads in the dressing room, lads who've won stuff as well and know what it's like to be, battling each week. It'll be crucial. All that leadership base could be crucial. Yeah.
Who's the key player then for Galway this year, you think?
It's a hard no. But I'm gonna put David Hurley down. Obviously he's off the back of First Division Player of the Year, and scored over 20 goals last year. Now he's never actually played in the Premier Division, but he's 25. He can still make that step up. I think if he can bring the form he had last year into this year, it'll be a huge boon to Galway United's chances at doing well this year. And I suppose maybe to maybe I hate saying a lesser extent, but I think a lot of Galway United success came from David Hurley, but also that strong back line. And I think a lot of people would label Brendan Clarke as one of possibly the best signings we've ever made. So Clarke and leading that back line as well, like that'll be really important. But on an individual level, I suppose David Hurley still will kind of be that key standout player for people coming into this year.
Looking ahead then to the big kick-off on Friday, what are you thinking? Is it it's sure to be a sold out DC Park? I mean, a big buzz for Premier Division game, 6 years. Do you think they go for the win, or is it draw an acceptable result for first game back against the FAI Cup winners?
I think a draw is definitely an acceptable result. I mean, like as I mentioned, I think to a certain degree with the FAI Cup run they had last year, you beat UCD, Dundalk, and only losing 1-0 to Bowes. I think people. So I think some people may be expecting us to hang very easily with our colleagues, with Galway United's colleagues in the Premier Division, but doing it week in and week out is a lot different to doing it in a handful of cup games. I think they have the ability. They could do okay against Pats, but I think it's one of the toughest opening fixtures you could ask for coming back into the Premier Division. So I think if they come away with a point on Friday night, I think that's a good night's work and a nice valuable point early on in the season against one of the teams that's going to be looking to be involved in the title challenge this year. So yeah, I think that'd be a good shout. I'd love, look, the Galway fans would love to see them win it, but I think with the nature of maybe having to adapt again to a higher level, I think if they come away with a draw, it'll be a good night.
It was a Hitchler score prediction then lastly.
Score prediction. I'll go for a 1-1 draw. That's what I'll go for. I think Galway United will keep it pretty tight. I don't think Pats will be allowed to score freely. And I think Galway United have the minute to get a goal. Look, they've scored against Premier Division opposition in the last 12 months. But then again, I tend to be wrong on this podcast, Luke. So so we'll see what happens. But I'll stick down a 1-1 prediction for Friday night.
Yeah, I say Michael D will like that as well. He'd like a 1-1 draw to kick off the season. Paul, look, great for coming on the show again. Chat to you soon.
Thanks, Luke. Cheers.
Get in touch. You can email us at extratimelive@gmail.com or tag us on Instagram using the hashtag League of Ireland or tweet us at Extratime News.
Let's do it.
Now we turn our focus to Shelbourne. I'm delighted to save the host of the 1895 podcast, Stephen Dooley. Stephen, how are you?
I'm good, Luke. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I suppose before we kind of talk about the on-the-field matters, just since last over the winter period, has been a change of ownership again. Uncertainty whether if Damien Duff was staying, was he going? Obviously, the new owner came in. Damien Duff signed a new contract. So where is Shells going into the first game of the season this weekend?
Overwhelmingly a positive humour around the club, I'd say, which is a bit worrying considering kind of what we've been through the last 10, 15 years. But yeah, you mentioned the kind of change in ownership. That was probably the biggest thing. I mean, as it panned out, I think if the Turkish owners had stayed, Duffer was out the door. And basically people from within the club, supporters, just basically hounded the club and said, look, if Damien Duff goes, I'm not renewing my season ticket. And I think it was that kind of power the supporters had in the end, kind of kept Damien around. And like as of that last game of the season against Drogheda, he was definitely felt like he was out the door. I mean, we were obviously hanging around while he was doing his media work at the end, and I think myself and the other media guys kind of looked at each other and went, something's not right here at all. But just relieved, I suppose, that he signed his new contract, and that kind of positivity has started to bleed into this week, really.
Is it disappointing how the Turkish ownership went in the end? Because I suppose when I was at the press conference back in June, July, it seemed like it was overwhelmingly positive. There was, talk of a link with Hull. He talked a big game at the press conference. Is this disappointing, kind of how that 6 months transpired?
Do you know what? It's a tough one because, like that, he met the press in the Aviva, and it was all kind of all the bells and whistles, and kind of promised sun, moon, and stars. Being totally honest now, looking back on it, I think a lot of people's guard was up with it. It was kind of the overwhelming thing in the supporter space was, are we just going to end up being a feeder club for Hull, basically? Now, as it transpired, Will Jarvis and Harry Wood, along with Jack Moylan, probably fired us to Europe in the end. So I'd say we probably got more out of Hull than Hull got out of us in the end, the way it panned out. But yeah, I mean, the thought of, the multi-millionaire owner and, money to do up Tolkien and money to spend on the squad and the infrastructure, it all sounded great at the time. As it panned out, I think there was a little bit more interference from their end than maybe the club thought there was going to be, and that obviously carried over to the manager. And it's, generally in a football club, I think if you were given the option of a multi-million euro or pound owner or a manager, the way football is at the moment, a lot of people would lean on, give us the owner, give us all the money. But I think Shels has been burnt before by just being caught on the hop. And in the end, now there's the fans forum a couple of weeks ago, and it still looks quite likely. We're kind of dotting the I's and crossing the T's on the Tolka deal now. So, look, it probably hasn't panned out too badly. There's a sense of relief that we kind of got out of the whole thing when we did. Because there's always the fear that, they throw money in and then disappear, which, look, Dundalk suffered on that end. But am I disappointed the way it went? I probably have to say no, because, look, we're back in Europe and, we built that squad, and like Will Jarvis has come back this season on loan again, so that's a positive. So no, probably couldn't say I'm disappointed. Maybe relieved would be a better word, the way it's panned out.
You kind of touched on the signings, and we'll have a look now at kind of the makeup of the squad. From a fan perspective, how happy are you with the squad going into the first weekend?
Really, really happy. Really happy. I think everyone seems to be. I mean, with that iron defence last year, really, ourselves and Rovers conceded the same amount of goals. So, like that's been a great base to build on. Then on the flip side of it, I think there's only the two relegated clubs, and I think Drogheda and Sligo were the only teams that scored less goals than us. So, obviously, up the top end of the pitch, I wouldn't say we struggled, but we weren't very consistent. So, like, obviously, the signing of Will Jarvis, John Martin, Dean Williams, Liam Burt, like all really good attacking players that'll add something. We struggled with depth last year with obviously Matty Smith and Sean Boyd were injured for a majority of the season. So we struggled off the bench really last year. So I think the likes of Williams, John Martin, Will Jarvis, Keith Ward, they just kind of offer so much depth, which is something we lacked. And like the standout one for me is probably Sean Gannon. Just to be able to attract him to the club with the amount of trophies he's won, the experience he has, especially in Europe as well. I don't think, again, a worryingly positive fan mood going into the week. Usually we're quite doom and gloom about stuff, but it all seems really, really positive. The one signing maybe that raised a lot of eyebrows for the wrong reason, probably John O'Sullivan. I think few people looked at that one, and you only had to look at the reaction of the Bows fans on social media when they seen he was gone. They were, nearly having a party to celebrate him being gone. I'm not so worried about the John O'Sullivan one. I've been lucky enough to be at a lot of the pre-season games, and he looks a different player playing under Duffer and Joey O'Brien. He was accused last year of being lazy and down in tools playing for Bows, but I think Bows were a bit all over the place themselves last year. So I trust in the manager and the staff with that signing. If he's not going to buy into the amount of work that's required and the amount of intensity that's needed to play in a Damien Duff team, I don't think he would have got a chance to put pen to paper. So that's the only question mark people seem to have. I don't have that question mark. I've got to see him in pre-season. He looks full of energy, bundles of experience. So, yeah, I'd like overwhelmingly positive. Liam Burt, I think he'd get into nearly anybody's team in the Premier Division. So you'd have to be positive, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's probably looking at the players they brought in, it's fairly obvious maybe that Damien Duff kind of addressed that was probably the weakness in the squad last year, maybe over-reliant on maybe Moylan for the goals that they have brought in, the likes of Ward, Martin, Burt, Williams and Jarvis. They're kind of players maybe they needed to kind of kick on to the next level.
Yeah, definitely. And like you mentioned there, Jack Moylan obviously went off to Lincoln, and I think Jack ended up being that kind of focal point by accident. It was kind of through the injuries to Sean Boyd and Matty Smith that Jack kind of ended up with that pressure on his shoulders. But the manager spoke about it at the end of the season that Jack just popped up when he was needed. That kind of way. There's a lot of kind of scrappy goals, penalties. He was just where we needed him to be at those moments. Look, he's a massive loss, Jack. You can't replace him, just the type of player he is. The bit of flair, the bit of unpredictability. But I was worried about that one in particular, about, how are you going to go about replacing the goals and just that cutting edge, I suppose, in the final third. But, I mean, Liam Burt, Will Jarvis will bring that in spades. As I mentioned, Matty Smith and Sean Boyd are back fully fit. They're going to be like new signings. And like Liam Burt can always pop up with a bit of magic. So, yeah, the outgoings could have really stung us, I think. But I think what we've brought in should hopefully kind of bridge that gap.
Is there any player in particular you'd be disappointed that's left the club over the winter?
Probably Luke Byrne. You'd have to say Luke. I mean, it was probably the worst kept secret that he was going to retire at the end of the season. And Luke was kind of in this link between toxic times in Tolka. Luke kind of came in at the back end of that and ended up being the captain and was there when we got promoted, stayed when we got relegated, when he had offers from all over the city and beyond. He still stayed on and obviously got us promoted again. And it's funny, it's like I'm gutted for Luke because he's not going to be able to play in Europe because his loyalty alone, taking his ability out of it and his ability as a captain out of it, just his loyalty to the club alone, I think he probably deserved the chance to play in Europe for Shells. But Luke would probably be the standout one. You're just gutted to see him go. Jack as well, of course. I mean, he's only here for a couple of seasons, but kind of got that cult hero status very quickly. But probably Luke, just for even what he brings off the pitch as well as on it. Now, he's obviously stayed around the club in a technical director role, which is brilliant. He's passing on that experience. But yeah, not seeing Luke in a red shirt this season will be strange.
Any area of the squad you're a bit concerned with going into the first game?
Maybe just the bit of depth in midfield. Maybe that would be the only kind of minor concern I'd have. Like, looks like Coyle and Lunny will probably be the two in the middle. We always played with the two in the middle last season, so it looks like the two lads are going to stay at that. It's just if you get an injury in that area, like Brian McManus and Evan Caffrey are obviously there as well. Just that bit of depth, maybe if you get an injury in there, like Mark Coyle is the type of combative midfielder that is going to pick up yellows and probably pick up a suspension or two along the way. So bit of depth through the middle maybe, but other than that, no, like I'm very happy. Possibly another defender again, just for the bit of depth, especially with European campaign to look forward to. But if I was being really fussy, one more midfielder and somebody that could cover centre half, left wing back, right wing back would be perfect. But that's an ideal world.
You mentioned it there. How much are the fans looking forward to Europe this season?
Oh, it's unheard of. I mean, I think some people, some clubs think Shells fans can be a bit dramatic when you being back in Europe. And I've seen people say, geez, they're celebrating as if they've won the Champions League. They're getting back into Europe. But it's hard to explain how far away the thought of being back in Europe was in. I mean, I'd even go back to like 2020, as recently as that. Like that relegation season was, during COVID, and it was grim. It's the best word you could use to describe it. Like to be back now for the first time since 2006 was the last European campaign. It seemed a mile away, and look, it would have been brilliant to have done it on the pitch down in Drogheda and to be able to celebrate it then with the supporters and that. But look, take it any way we can get it, even if it meant the Pat's favour. But it's magic. It just seemed so far away in the not too distant past.
Who'll be the key player look out for this season?
I've kind of two in my head. I've from the group that was there last year. Gav Malloy is just like beyond his years. You forget how young he is. I think there was clubs from England sniffing around last season. And thankfully, we got that contract re-signed. So He's been kept on. I think he's only going to go from strength to strength. I think playing in Europe will help him. He's the anchor in the middle of that back three. At the moment, it looks like that's where he's going to play. He can kind of do everything. He's brilliant on the ball. He can dribble out of defence with it. He's good in the air. On the ground, he's brilliant. He's strong. He's quick. He just kind of has a bit of everything. So from last year's bunch, I'd say Gav Malloy. Out of new signings, Liam Burt for me, I think is the most exciting one. I tend not to take too much or pay too much attention to opposition players. So when he was playing for Bowes and that, I kind of, well, he done us in a few times as well. So you probably put him to the back of your mind because of that. But I think he went under the radar a little bit with Rovers last year as well, with him not being in the team early on. And then he kind of came into it towards the end. But from seeing him in pre-season, he's just magic. He just has something that I don't think there's very few players in the league have what he has, that ability to dribble. He's, as the manager mentioned, he loves players that'll get you up off your seat. Liam Burke's definitely one of them. He starts dribbling at people. He just goes by players, can score from distance. He's just exciting. Similar to Jack Boylan, but I think a little bit more flair maybe with Liam Burke. He'd definitely be my one to look out for out of new signings, and Gavin Malloy from last year, definitely.
I thought you might have mentioned Will Jarvis.
Yeah, Jarvis is a funny one. Like, I think he only played 10 games or something last season. Now, he was magic in those games that he played in. And again, to go back to like what Duffer says about him, he's like an old school kind of winger where he just gets his head down out on the touchline, dribbles past people. He scored important goals for us last year. Yeah, probably not fair to not mention Will, but I think he could have a change in his position maybe this year, because we seem to be playing with kind of two number 10s playing off a striker, and we've obviously the two wing backs, which I'd be shocked if it's not Tyreek Wilson and Sean Gannon come Friday down the RSC. But whether Jarvis plays as a number 10, he could probably play up as the most advanced player as well. He can play in a number of different roles, but yeah, I think the talk of Jarvis going to a certain other Dublin club, I think, helped with the happiness when he did eventually end up with Shells. So I think a lot of people were worried that we'd be seeing him playing in different colours, which would have been like a dagger through the heart, really. But yeah, he's another one, probably unfair of me not to mention him.
What's the aspirations then for the season?
Do you want the realist answer or do you want the ambitious answer?
Ambitious, come on. It's a preview show, ambitious.
Ambitious, I could definitely end up with egg on my face here, but I don't think it's impossible for us to challenge Rovers. Now, when I say challenge Rovers, I mean be the closest to them. I do still think they're a good mile ahead of everybody else, just with the experience, the depth that they have. But I don't think it's unrealistic. I think if we keep the group fit, first of all, and with a good start, because obviously everyone's seen how Rovers started last season, with a strong start, we're like a hyper organised team. That's not negative. Everyone paints the Damien Duff team as negative. If you actually watch it, it's really not. It's organised. It's tough to break down, but it's exciting, and it will be more exciting going the other way this year. There's match winners in the squad, like you mentioned there, Will Jarvis, Liam Burt. Like the likes of a Keith Ward can come off the bench and unlock teams. And that was where something we struggled with last season, was bodies coming off the bench. I wouldn't be totally surprised to see us be the closest team to Rovers this year.
What's the realistic ambition then? That was the outrageous.
That was the pie in the sky stuff. Yeah. The realistic one, Europe again. I'd say you'd probably have to say, whether that's through a cup win or finish it in the top three. Definitely Europe again. To be able to challenge for leagues regularly, you need to be in Europe regularly, not only for the money, but just for that status that you can attract the better players when you're playing in Europe. I'd go as far as to say it'll probably be a disappointing season if we don't qualify for Europe. Now again, that's probably I'd say there's a few Shells fans going to listen to this say, oh no, don't start that stuff. But yeah, I would genuinely, with the squad we have, with the staff that's there, with the just a good kind of humour around Tolka at the minute. I mean, the Riverside will be bouncing on match nights. Not an easy place to go is Tolka. So, yeah, not qualifying for Europe, I think, would be disappointing.
Finally, then, looking ahead to Friday night, how do you see the game going?
Look, you're always going to get Watford's first game back in the Premier Division. Look, the game is pretty much sold out. It will be sold out come Friday. There'll be a lot of buzz around Watford, around the town, but it's similar to the Cup semi-final that we had a couple of years ago down there. Loads of buzz, loads of excitement around. I think they felt they had the game won before they even started, and the bit of Gavin Malloy quality in the end proved the difference. I would probably expect Shells to spoil the party, to be totally honest with you. A narrow win would be my prediction. But look, especially the first game of the season, newly promoted team, could go either way, but I would probably expect us to win the game, narrowly.
Score prediction then, 1-0, 2-1?
1-0. We don't do too many goals. We'll start as we finished last season. I go 1-0.
Stephen, thanks for coming on. We'll chat again soon.
Luke, no problem. Thanks, man.
Get in touch. You can email us at extratimelive@gmail.com or tag us on Instagram using the hashtag League of Ireland or tweet us at Extratime News.
Let's do it.
Now we look ahead to the year with Donal and Ryan as we chat Sligo Rovers. Donal, how are you?
Good, Luke. Thanks for having us on.
Good to hear you again. Sligo then, I suppose if John Russell was here, he'd probably say the same as himself. Probably a disappointing campaign last year. Is there any room for optimism this year? They might have a better campaign, I think.
Well, I think putting it saying disappointing campaign last year is putting it fairly lightly, Luke, to be honest, given the money that was spent and the budget that was there for Rovers last year. I suppose it couldn't have gone much worse. But I think with the signings that have been made this year now, obviously there was a big clear at the end of the last season. The season wasn't even over by a week, and the club had already confirmed 9 departures out of the squad. That's massive no matter what end of the table you're at, But John looks to have built a very tight squad this year. Like, the squad is significantly smaller than it was this year. Now, Sligo Rovers traditionally work off as kind of a smaller squad anyway, but only 20 senior players signed as of now as we're recording this evening. So like it is going to be a tight squad, but there is hope and there is optimism certainly around the club ahead of the new season kicking off on Friday.
I suppose in terms of incomings, I suppose the one that stood out really was probably Ed McGinty coming back.
Absolutely. It's like you can't understate how big a signing that is. I mean, since he left, really, the goalkeeping position has kind of been a bit of a, maybe might be harsh to say, a weak point for Sligo Rovers. I mean, Luke McNicholas came in and he did well enough to earn himself a move to Wrexham. Connor Walsh, who was the number 2 then, was kind of thrown in at the deep end when Rovers were struggling. It was probably his first real proper run of games in the side. And then Richard Brush, who's been around the league, I think he's in his 4th spell at Sligo Rovers now, and he's also on the coaching staff as well, was drafted in just to kind of steady the ship at the end of the season, just to make sure that Rovers actually stayed up. But Ed McGinty was probably the best keeper in the league when he left. I mean, you can argue for Alan Manus or whatever, but the performances that Ed McGinty was churning in, week out, just before he moved to Oxford and then in the middle of Rovers' European run that year as well. I mean, he was a huge figure in the team, both on and off the field, really. He's a big character around the club and probably is the biggest signing coming back in ahead of the new season. And it's great to see, I suppose, a familiar face coming back in as well. Ed McGinty, he knows the club, he knows what Sligo, he came up through the academy here at Rovers as well. So familiarity, a big thing for him coming back, and a huge, huge signing for Rovers there in the off-season.
Any other incomings that will excite fans? Possibly maybe Simon Power, winger, didn't get probably as much game time as he wanted at Shamrock Rovers, but has a reputation of being a good young player.
Yeah, bar Ed McGinty, now this is probably the signing I was most excited about, to be honest. Simon Power is a great player. Anytime I saw him playing for Shamrock Rovers in the brief opportunities that he had, he really impressed. He's kind of the player that kind of gets fans up off their seats. He's very good technically, fast, direct, kind of nimble, and I'm sure he can chip in with the odd goal and assist or 2 as well, and that's what he'll be hoping to do. But keeping him fit is going to be key for Sligo Rovers this year. His injury record since he's come back into the League of Ireland has been absolutely horrific for his own standards as well. It's probably been very tough on him, but the likes of players of Simon Power, like the kind of lads that were playing for the top teams in the League of Ireland, but not really getting a run in the side, or like were unfortunate with injuries as well. They're the kind of lads that John Russell has kind of targeted. When you look at the likes of Wilson Ruairi as well, he comes in having scored 13 goals in the first division last year. He's probably ready for that step up now to Premier Division football. And I think a couple of Galway fans were disappointed to see him go. Conor Malley coming in from Dundalk as well, really kind of create a technical player in the middle of the park. Showed good glimpses for Dundalk last year, but I don't think it really ultimately worked out the way he would have liked. These are all players that are coming into the club now with a point to prove, to kind of put themselves back on the shop window, maybe progress their careers even further. They're the kind of lads that John Russell needs to kind of lift Sligo Rovers out of the kind of hole they fell into at the end of last season.
Yeah, and I suppose the negative side maybe of the transfer this year has been the outgoings. A lot of experience has walked out the door.
Yeah, it has, but like they were decisions that John Russell was happy to make. He was happy to let those players go. Obviously with the way the season went as well, I'm sure there was a couple of players among them that he would have liked to have kept. Personally speaking, I would have liked to have held on to Gary Buckley. I think he's a huge loss. A couple of Sligo Rovers fans maybe happy to see him go. They reckon he wasn't the same player that came back after he did that horrific cruciate injury when the Rovers were over in Norway on the European run. He came back for the tail end of last season as well. People say he wasn't the same player, but to me, he's experienced, he's done it all, he's won everything there is to win in Ireland, and to see him go to Galway was a bit of a sickener for me personally, but John Russell was happy to let him go if he wanted to go. You can't really stop him. Same with Greg Bulger. I think I would have liked to have held on to him as well. Probably the wrong side of 30 as well. Players are getting older, and Russell probably wants to bring in a younger profile into the squad as well. I think the one that surprised everybody was letting David Cawley go, as he's gone up to Finn Harps now. He was club captain at the time. I don't think he was too happy in the manner that he was let go either. But like I said, these are all decisions that John Russell was happy to make. And just going through the age profile of the squad now, the oldest player is Simon Power rather, and J.R. Wilson. The two of them are 25 years of age, and they're the oldest outfield players in the squad. So it's a significant decrease in age, and hopefully that'll bode well for Sligo Rovers for what will be a tough season. But I think they're more than capable of staying up. A lot of people seem to have written them off in the kind of predictions that I've been seeing thrown around on social media. I haven't seen them any higher than 7th, and plenty of people have them to go straight down. I don't think I'd agree with that. I think 7th is certainly a very achievable finish for Sligo Rovers, and I reckon it's well within their grasp to get it. Yeah,
it's interesting the age profile for the side decreased massively there. I didn't realise the oldest player is 25. I suppose the one player that I quite liked when I seen him play from an attacking point, I thought Johan Brandeflag was quite good in right forward. I thought he was actually a good player. But then again, J.R. Wilson coming in, I suppose that's kind of the like-for-like replacement on that one.
Yeah, and Brandeflag, who was good in flashes last year as well. Probably the defensive side of his game, and for a fullback, it's not great. But I think originally he started out his career as a centre mid and was kind of drafted back into defence and out to right back. But he chipped in with 6 assists from right full last year as well, and a couple of goals as well. So I didn't think he did too badly. He would have been another one of the initial 9 that I would have liked to have kept personally. Himself and Gary Buckley, probably the two out of that initial first draft of players that left, I would have liked to have seen stay on, but he's gone back to Sweden now. I think he's gone into the 3rd tier back in Sweden in his home country. So best of luck to him. But as you said there, Luke, as well, J.R. Wilson coming in from Shelbourne, knows the League of Ireland. Good pedigree. Had a decent season for Shells last year. Probably wasn't getting a proper run towards the end of the season last year, but fits the profile of the squad that John Russell is trying to build. Just kind of a real steady kind of mature squad, I suppose. Squad that knows the League of Ireland is familiar. They know what to expect. It's not like last year where there are a couple of players coming in from abroad, but as Sligo Rovers often tend to do because of the logistics of the club, just where they're based, it's harder to attract players of a high standard to Sligo in general. Never mind to play for Sligo Rovers. It's hard to get them out of Dublin, never mind out of Europe. So he's kind of gone for players that kind of know the league. He's managed to retain a good core of the squad there as well, even though 9 of them have left. But you're making Niall Morahan at 23 years of age, the captain of the club, another player who's come up through the academy as well. Caelan Barlow's been speaking in local media this week about how much it means to him to play for the club as a local lad, as a lad from Sligo, and John Mahon's there as well, although his season is pretty much over already. He tore his Achilles in training, but the kind of spine of this club is the spine of the squad rather is there, and pretty much a local thing, and that'll really stand for Sligo Rovers this season.
Yeah, that was I was going to throw to there about kind of the players they have and they've retained, and I was going to mention John Mann. That's a huge blow that he's out for such a long period again.
Yeah, absolutely huge, because he was coming back into this season now in the best shape, both physically and mentally. Like, he went over to Scotland there after a really good spell after breaking into the team from the academy. It didn't really work out for him over there, and it kind of took him a while to get back into his stride once he returned to Sligo Rovers, and he was coming back into the pre-season, ready to kind of take on a leadership role within the team. And it's just absolutely devastating for him, because it was going to be a big year to kind of cement his place back in and leading the team from the back, and to tear his Achilles like that, and he'll be out. I think John Russell was saying he's hoping to get him back in towards the latter end of the season. So hopefully we'll see John Mahon get a couple of minutes for Sligo Rovers this year, but absolutely devastating injury before a ball was even kicked in pre-season, never mind with the league starting on Friday. He's already a huge loss, and Rovers have had to kind of fill holes at the back there as a result. Ollie Denham coming in on loan from Cardiff as well. He'll be of decent standard. He's played now, as I said, minimal experience in the Championship, but he still played 5 games in the Championship for Cardiff, came up through the academy at Man United as well, so he's a decent standard of player. And Charlie Wiggett as well, another right back signed from Newcastle on a permanent deal. He'll be eager to impress as well. And as I said, like the rest of the players that John Russell signed, kind of put himself back in the shop window, players that have a point to prove and will hopefully be keeping Sligo Rovers up this year.
If we were to talk about key players that to look out for this year, I suppose you've mentioned a couple of times last year, probably the one that I remember you'd say a lot is Fabrice Hartman. Is he someone that can maybe have another big year ahead of him for the club? Like, he showed flashes last year, it was brilliant. Does he just need to find maybe more consistency in his play?
Yeah, absolutely. And, one big thing that hampered Sligo Rovers last year was injuries. I think at one stage in the middle of the summer, there was 10 of the starting team out, like 10 players that you would have picked or had on the bench, 10 of them all out at the same time. Fabrice Hartman, obviously one of those as well. Certainly a player, there's no question about his ability. It's just whether he can bring the consistency now and get a good string of games behind him. Another player as well that came in last year, Reece Hutchinson, as well. Big season for him at left back as well. He's come back in top nick as well ahead of the new season. He's been flying it in pre-season too, so hopefully it'll be another big season out of him. But I suppose one of the young guns that signed his first pro deal is Owen Elding. I think he might be one to keep an eye on this season once he gets his chance. He's only 17. He's still doing his leaving cert this year, so it'll be a big year for him both on and off the pitch. Obviously, his father, Anthony Elding, played for Sligo Rovers as well, scored the winning goal in the cup final in 2013 against Drogheda United, wrote himself into Rovers history books forevermore. So and still kind of involved around the club as well. So it'll be a big year for Owen Elding, and I'm sure he will get a chance this season to show what he's made of. He had a great season for the under-19s last year. I think he scored over 20 goals while still being eligible for under-17 as well. So maybe he'll be the next big academy star to break into the Sligo Rovers first team.
Yeah, there's been I think over the last decade there's been a fair conveyor belt of players that come through the academy of Sligo and all have good careers, and maybe he's the next one. So I'm chatting to other people over the last day or so about their previews, the Bohemians, Dundalk. I kind of put John Russell maybe in the same category as, say, Stephen O'Donnell, Declan Devine. Is it a big year for him managerial wise that this season doesn't go well, doesn't start well, the pressure might come on his job?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a completely fair statement to make, Luke, to be honest. I mean, John Russell probably knows himself the pressure he'll be under if Rovers don't get off to a good start. There was fans calling for his head at the end of last season based on how the season went and how Rovers, they stayed up by the skin of their teeth in the end of it. He certainly won't be happy with that because he knows himself what he's capable of as a manager. But the start to the season is going to be crucial for Sligo Rovers, because if you're starting off on the back foot, the players and the management team are going to be under severe pressure straight away. Of course, hopefully there won't be a hangover from last season just kind of clouding over the team like that, and I'm sure John Russell will be eager to shake that. But as he said in the local media and stuff, and then speaking in the press at the launch of the League of Ireland season in Vicar Street there during the week or during last week as well, he seems happy with the squad that he's built, and there seems to be a different kind of aura around the team now this year. So hopefully, I'm sure he'll be hoping that it'll be enough to kind of get off to a good start. Like he's been saying himself, will they win every game this season? Of course they won't, but the start will be crucial for Sligo Rovers this year.
What's a good season with Sligo this year then?
I think consolidating the place in the league, really kind of being clear of any kind of relegation thoughts, again, purely just based off the back of last season. I think you can kind of predict your top 1, 2, 3, and maybe 4 that'll finish in the league. And it's kind of hard to judge where any of the rest of them are going to finish, just because a lot of the teams are unknown quantities. Like, I mean, the amount of signings that Dundalk and Bohemians, I kind of have them in around Sligo Rovers this year as well. Nobody knows what they're going to bring or how they're going to click or how they're going to gel. So it's kind of tough to see where these teams are going to finish. But on the flip side of that, I do think what Sligo Rovers have managed to bring in, I think they seem to have gelled really well. You'd be walking around the town, you see groups of 2 and 3 players, going for coffees and stuff and hanging out and just spending time with each other and getting to know each other. And that's key to, building good morale and good team spirit as well. A good season for Sligo Rovers, to answer your question, Luke, I suppose, is like, as I said, staying clear of relegation. I reckon Rovers can finish 7th this year. It's well within their reach to do so. Who finishes above them or below them, it's hard. It's very hard to know, because, as I said, we don't know where the teams or how the teams are going to stack up this year, just with the sheer amount of new players that are coming into the league, as is every year. But I think 7th for Sligo Rovers, and maybe a good run in the cup this year as well. They're overdue that, I think, going out in the first round the last 3 years in a row, and as a side with good history in the cup as well, I think Rovers fans will be delighted with a good cup run this year. So I think 7th and a good run in the cup is a good year for Sligo Rovers this year.
We'll start the season though away in Daly Park on Friday night. How do you see it going?
Yeah, it's gonna be tough, because I think Bohs and Sligo Rovers will be kind of sizing each other up, saying probably amongst themselves, saying the same thing about each other. If you get me, everything I've said about Bohemians there, about the amount of players they've signed, the turnover of the squad, etc. No doubt Bohs fans will be saying the same thing about Sligo Rovers. So it is going to be tight, and it just depends who hits the ground running first. I don't think whoever loses, would the manager, etc., I don't think they'll be under pressure straight away just after the first game. But it's what happens after that in the kind of second, third, fourth game. That's when you're going to see who'll be under pressure early on. But in terms of a result, I reckon Rovers are definitely good enough to come away with a win there. And if I was to put my neck on the line, I reckon Rovers win 2-1.
Donal, as always, thanks for coming on, and we'll chat again soon.
No problem, Luke. Thanks very much. Best of luck for the season.
Get in touch. You can email us at extratimelive@gmail.com or tag us on Instagram using the hashtag League of Ireland, or tweet us at Extratime News.
Let's do it. And now we're delighted to have 2 representatives talk about Kerry. If we missed out on them last week, we have Barry Duggan and we have Anton Manning to discuss from the Kerrymen podcast. Lads, how are we?
Not too bad now. How are you? Thanks for having us.
No, fair play. We might be a bit late with our first division preview, but we got there in the end. I suppose, lads, before we even chat about the football and the season ahead, just suppose in the off season for the club, of his first year was a huge success for the club, just to be on the pitch playing. But obviously the ownership issue, Billy Denny leaving. So just in terms of where's the club back coming into the season off the field?
I think it's in a better place than it was last year. Realistically, I think Billy kind of took on a lot of roles within the club last year, a lot of jobs, and I feel it was probably behind his decision to step down as a manager, to step in behind the scenes, to kind of create more of a concrete in the background of the club, to create the club running a bit more smoothly,
Yeah, and in terms of the owner parting ways and going to Dundalk, was that a surprise to the people?
Yeah, I think it was a huge surprise at the time, because obviously he had come out and said all his plans for next year and then kind of jumped ship. But I think if he didn't really suit the role then, because he's going on about he wants to do things for Dundalk, and really he could have done them for Kerry as well. But the club's still in a fantastic position, and we're obviously bouncing forward, looking forward to this new season starting as well. I think Brian kind of was more of a face than a doer behind the scenes. I think that was it'll probably work out better for the club in the long run. I think Brian talked a lot, but I don't think there was much being done. So it didn't really come as a shock to the club from what I'm hearing, but they seem quite happy that he's out of the picture in a way.
So look, obviously you read reports sometimes with owners leaving and all, you kind of maybe can create kind of worry and whatnot, but just from talking to the lads there, it seems like it's business as usual then going to the years. It's not having an effect on anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, Brian obviously was a big part of getting the club running from the get-go. So like obviously a very important part. He brought in investors with him, but as soon as he left, I think the club put a lot of work into Brian's investors to make sure they were still happy with what they were doing and what the way the club is going. So it's all systems go. I think there's no difference really, other than probably a bit more work done behind the scenes, because Billy stepped into a proper role of a board member, like overseeing the running of the club.
From a fan perspective, how did you view your first season, first division? Was that as you expected, or were you surprised, or what's kind of the general perspective of how the fans kind of perceived last season?
I think last season, straight away, first of all, everyone was just delighted to have a club down in Kerry, in the League of Ireland. There wasn't much expectation from our point of view. You wanted, obviously, a home win is still eluding us, but you wanted points on the board, you wanted performances, and we got that towards the end of the season. Obviously winning against Athlone was huge, and coming back to Mount Hawk Park and grinding out draws, losing unfortunate leads, but it's all positive. Like, it really just shows the build from the start of the season to the end of the season, and it's just going to keep going from there now.
In terms of the makeup of the squad, then it seems to be a lot of the players have re-signed who were part of the team last year. I imagine the makeup of the squad be quite young again.
Yeah, I think we've 18 last year's squad still involved. Like the average age, I still touch around 20 or 21. I'd say, even with the new lads that came in, still keep that age down. But I think it's the player profile the boys look for. It's very important for a new club that they're kind of creating something for the future, not for the now. And I think that's a big part of the club's philosophy going forward, that they won't be looking for that 28, 29, 30-year-old. They're more likely to sign a 22 or 23-year-old, which is very, very exciting from our point of view, that they're looking for hungry young players that are capable of playing good football, and that seems to be the profile of Kerry FC.
Who will be the players then, I suppose, for people listening? Who are the players kind of look out for maybe this year for Kerry?
I suppose, like, Ronan Sheehan in the midfield. He's 18, 19. He's just an absolute workhorse in the middle. Kennedy Amici, who went on trial there during the summer, or during the off season, and he's come back and he's already firing and moving around. I think Daniel Akute, we didn't really see a lot of him last year. He didn't really live up to the hype, but first two games that we've seen him play now this season, he's definitely going to be one that they have to watch out for.
With Kerry being such a young team, it's very hard to pick out a couple of players. Usually when you're looking at squads, you're kind of picking out their younger players. But with all our players being so young, it's very hard to pick out a few. But Sam, out of the new centre half, he played a lot of games last year. Played in a right back, right wing back. Seems to be in a centre half now this year, and from the start of the season, looks a different man, a lot stronger, a lot more confident on the ball. So I think we're going to see a lot more confidence come from Kerry this year.
Just on the outgoings then, I suppose the big one was probably Leo Gaxa leaving, going to Galway.
Yeah, that's I think that was kind of expected. In a way, look, Leo was fantastic for us last year. Look, created a lot of our goals, scored a lot of our goals. He was fantastic for 38 games out of 38. I was hoping that we might get another year out of him. But look, when full-time football comes calling, and like Galway after getting promoted to the Premier Division, very attractive side, well-run club, we can't blame him for leaving. We'd always welcome him back. But that will hurt, I think. But hopefully, with the signing of Valerie Daya from Athlone, that's probably supposed to fill that void. So I hope he can live up to the expectations of that.
Just obviously looking at the tape from last season, I suppose, if you're looking at area you need to address this year, is it defensively? Obviously, again, a lot of young lads playing, a lot of new guys to the league. I suppose, is it a target maybe for the new management team to look at it and say, can we cut the goals we're conceding down? Obviously, conceding 91 total last year is probably a bit too much, maybe.
Yeah, a lot of the goals came from set pieces, and it wasn't really addressed during the season. It was kind of hard to do, especially when you're swapping and changing goalkeepers. I think we had 5 or 6 goalkeepers, so many different centre-back partnerships. So it wasn't really until the end of the season where they did tighten it up at the back. But realistically, I think that they will concede less this year. They're stronger. They're more organised. There's a lot more leaders on the pitch in defence. You know, Andy Spain coming in, good League of Ireland experience. He's going to slot in nicely with Sam in centre back, and then you have the likes of Jack Kavanagh. He's going to tighten it up, and then we have our own like Kevin Williams. He's going to do a good job there as well. So hopefully now, less than 91 obviously would be a dream.
Yeah, they're after signing Antonio Tuta as well from Finn Harps. So like even like regards to what we talked last week about the 3 goalkeepers we have signed in the squad, kind of all performed quite well. Antonio only played 1 game for us, but looks very, very confident on the ball. And you know, I think with a keeper like that behind the back line, it always helps the confidence of the defence as well, and the experience as well. But like they learn from those mistakes. Like they're good lads, they're young lads, but they're well capable of changing that. And I think they'll do a job this year big time.
Another thing Kerry made the news recently was, go back a couple months now, was obviously appointing Conor McCarthy. He's the youngest manager in the league. I think he's the youngest manager in the league since Stephen Kenny. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like what's like as a fan, like is he perceived as a good young coach? I think he was involved in 19s last year. Is he someone that they're excited to take the team forward?
Yeah, absolutely. Macca has been involved with the Kerry League of Ireland teams from underage straight through to now. Like was involved with Billy last year. Macca was first loved within the camp by all the players, and like you know, a change of management is always tough on a new team. But all the lads were buzzing when Macca's name was announced. Like you know, great tactician, organisation skills of I don't know what. That's all we're hearing from the camp, that the man is the most organised gaffer they've ever had. And look, they all seem excited. And look, you can see it on the pitch the first 2 games. I know once we're seeing a cup and everyone's kind of in a bit of a pre-season, like, but like the organisation of the team, like they're a lot stronger on the ball. They know exactly what they're doing on the pitch. Like, you know, he will improve them massively. And Joe, he brought him James Shuki, assistant manager. He was assistant manager of Billy last year. So he's a good understanding of the players. Like, but together I think they'll be a great team. It's very exciting.
In terms of the interest the team has in Kerry, I suppose if you go back through the years, we've had regional teams in Monaghan and we've had them in Kildare, and the list goes on. And unfortunately, sometimes maybe they start with great impulse and people buying into the team, and then maybe that kind of interest fades or goes away. Like, going into the second season, is there still that same buzz, I suppose, that there was 12 months ago when Kerry were making their debut in the first division?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, you know, even though we only got to double figures in points last season, we're still getting 600 or 700 up at the games, and the stadium only holds 12 or so. So it's kind of it's one of those things, like you hear it around town as well, because obviously Cork City are down in the first division now, and it's our first game this season. But everyone's looking forward to it. Everyone's buzzing. They're still selling season tickets left, right, and centre. So I think the excitement's actually building more and more. And the interest is growing a lot more. You see flags around the town and people wearing all the gear and the jerseys, which you didn't have last year as much. But yeah, it's definitely building a lot more, I'd say.
I think the proper pre-season this year has helped as well, as regards to people being able to pick up the games a lot earlier, and kind of jumped into Division 1 football last year. And like a lot of people would support, you know, I'd pop up to show the face, like, but we averaged maybe 700 come the end of the season. It did drop off a small bit, but as expected, like, but I think it's going to be very solid this year. A lot of people, there's a lot of big soccer fans in Kerry. It's not all about GA down here, believe me. Like we've 300 tickets sold for Cork City, our first away game of the year, like, you know, so it's obvious that people are really buying into it, like, and it's great to see.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I've seen photographs of David Clifford and Paul Geaney at games as well. So it seems to be a real buy-in from the community. So look, the last real question we need to ask is just the kind of the aspiration for the season is, again, just to kind of maybe consolidate. Could they possibly, you know, I think you kind of alluded to it there, if they can get their first win on the board at home, be obviously a huge achievement. Is it just a case of maybe picking up, say, a target of 5-6 wins? Is that kind of maybe the goal for this season?
No, we're winning the league this year.
Brilliant.
Yeah, look, obviously we want to do a lot better than last season, but I do think playoffs is the aim for the team. I think they want playoffs. We obviously want playoffs. But yeah, if they're hovering around there, that's going to be an unbelievable season, you know. But as long as it's not bottom, I think most people will be happy with that too.
I think realistically, if we can be competitive, I think we were quite competitive against a lot of teams last year. We took a lot of beatings as well off the bigger lads. I think we'd be a lot more competitive against every team this year. Build a better squad. We're a lot stronger. I suppose an aim would be great if you get the 7 or 8 wins in the season, maybe hit the 30-point mark, somewhere around where Finn Harps in 9th finished last year. And you'll be happy. Anything after that's a bonus, really.
Looking ahead into Friday, you touched on it there, the big Munster derby going to Turner's Cross. What do you think for the game?
That's tough to call. The people talking about Cork City aren't in good form at the moment. They're not scoring goals in pre-season, then there's a bit of fear and stuff like that. But you still have to be realistic about it. It all depends what shows up on today. I think Kerry are kind of in the best form they've been in probably since they joined the League of Ireland at the moment. So probably meeting Cork at a good time. But look, at this minute, I think Cork are unknown. Maybe a poor pre-season, they could come out on Friday and be a completely different team. But once we can be competitive against them, and show that we can do it, we've a bit of fight about us, and we're happy after that. And anything more than a loss is a bonus, really. If you can get a point or a couple of goals there, I think you're happy.
Well, here's the score prediction then. 1-0, the away side.
No, 2-1 Kerry. 2-1 Kerry.
I think 1-1 draw. 1-1 draw.
Two goals in the cross.
100%. 100%. Watch Kevin Williams score a 40-yard screamer.
Lads, thanks for coming on. We'll chat again soon.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Get in touch. You can email us at extratimelive@gmail.com or tag us on Instagram using the hashtag League of Ireland or tweet us at Extratime News.
Let's do it.
And that's a wrap. We've covered 19 of the 20 League of Ireland clubs. Unfortunately, we didn't get to Athlone, Tom. But if any of them Athlone is out there listening and they want to give their preview, even if it's after the league kickoff, we will absolutely accept. And please come on and talk about Athlone. Tom, Prime Division fixtures, you want to list them off once more for our audience?
So we'll start with the one you probably have most interest in, where Pats are travelling to Galway to take on Galway United in season opener. How do we think this is going to go?
Well, I'm going. I'll be in Easy Park, so I'm expecting. I'll go 2-1 victory.
2-1 to Galway, obviously.
Yes, of course, to Galway. Yeah, 2-1 the Pats. Chris Forrester to make his return from injury and score a brace.
Waterford are hosting Shelbourne in the second promotion club at home.
Yeah, 1-1.
Derry hosting Drogheda.
3-0 Derry.
Bows at home to Sligo Rovers.
2-1 Bows.
And I'm going to take a 0-0 draw at Tallaght Stadium between Shamrock Rovers and Dundalk.
And I'm going to go 3-0 Shamrock Rovers. First division then, we'll list them off very quick then. Cork City are playing Kerry, as I mentioned, big game, big Munster derby. Athlone Town, Wexford, Treaty United Cove, Bray UCD, and Longford Town, Finn Harps. Tom, as we're nearly there, a big kickoff Friday night. Are you going to the game in Oriel? Or sorry, in Tallaght Stadium, rather? I
don't think I'll make this Friday's game, unfortunately. I just won't be in a position to travel up to Tallaght Stadium, but I'll be watching it on the TV. A rarity on a Friday night to be watching on TV and not be in either Drogheda or Oriel Park, but I'm gonna ease myself into the season, and I'm gonna watch it on TV.
Yeah, and I suppose we touched on it maybe last week about TV. It's brilliant the fact that games live. It's 48 games being shown across the leagues this year again, which is an increase. I'd argue should be more, but we'll take the positives out of it. Yeah, so it's on RTE. I believe kickoff is 8:15, I think, if I'm correct. I think all games are 8:15, aren't they, on Friday?
We have it down at 8 o'clock on the website here, so we have to double check.
Yeah,
we'll double check on that one.
Yeah, might be moved because of TV. Yeah, okay, I think that's a wrap. I think if you're listening, get to a game. Like I've always said, can't beat live football. Get down, watch a match. If you haven't been to the League of Ireland game before, your friend hasn't been, drag them down. Perfect time to do it. Crowds are on the up. The buzz about the league. There's something in the air. Get down, support the league. Tom, thank you.
Not at all. And look, and just for anybody who can't get to a game, don't forget that the next morning we have match reports on every Premier Division and First Division games, and we'll have Oisín Langan's voice notes, which will be available on Saturday morning with reviews and reports from almost every game. So if you can't get to the game, like Luke says, you can't beat live football, but the voice note, Oisín Langan's voice notes podcast is not a bad second place.
No, and I'll be listening to that Saturday morning as I come home the train from Galway after a 3-0 win in Terryland Park, hopefully. For everyone else, thanks for listening. Thanks to all our guests. We'll chat to you all next week.